how's it going? Welcome to this Angular Crash Course 2021. Well, I named this video Crash Course, but it's actually not a crash course. The reason why I'm calling it Crash Course is because I want to teach you, actually make you Angular developer in about a couple of hours. A lot of Angular videos can be very complex because Angular is a complex framework. I'm going to make it very simple. I'm going to speak to you in very simple language and teach you Angular in a way where you understand the concept and then use those concepts to learn more. So let's take a look at the content of this video. So we're going to start with Angular basics. First, we will have this project setup and tooling. Next, we are going to learn some core concepts like modules, components, services, pipes, directives, templates. Then we are going to jump into dependency injection and forms. Dependency injection is one of the complex topics in Angular, but don't worry, we'll make it very simple. Next, we have a HTTP client module. So every web application, mobile application require a communication with the server. So that's where Angular client module comes into play. And any code which is not tested is not the good code. That's why I said good code is the one which is tested. So we take a look at briefly how to test our Angular code. Once we understand the basics, then we jump into some Angular advanced topics, like we talk about Angular routing and navigation. Then we will understand how do we use some UI libraries like Angular Material or Ionic or Bootstrap in Angular. It will involve some configuration. Another thing that we need to talk about is input and output decorators in Angular. So in Angular, we use components a lot. So everything is basically built off a component. Now we need to share data within the components or push the data in the component or get the data out from the component. That's where this input and output decorator comes into play. And we're going to take a look at that. Now from here, we covered all the core concepts of Angular. We also looked at some examples. We already built one or two small applications using Angular. Then from here, the most important thing that I will show you is how to learn more from here. A lot of crash courses or even Angular courses, which are about 20 hours or 30 hours or 40 hours, I feel like they are complex, they are lengthy, and they don't deliver some, straight away knowledge. And they don't really tell you how to actually explore the framework by yourself and learn more. So we're going to talk about that. Next, I want to talk a little bit about what are some prerequisites that you need to know before you can start this video. So we're going to have to understand, obviously, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but also TypeScript. TypeScript is a subset of JavaScript which is used in Angular. It's very close to JavaScript, but it adds some sugarcoating on the top of JavaScript. Then we have some web APIs which are important. How to use web APIs like Storage API, how to use browser API like Chrome APIs. That information can be found in Mozilla Development Network as well. Now, these things are very required, like they are just required. You cannot start this video if you're not really good with these four things. In terms of web APIs, you don't really need to know every single API available in the browser. For example, APIs provided by MDN for Firefox. You don't need to have a practical experience, you just need to know where to find them, how to explore more about them, and how to use them, and general concept of APIs. Next, we have this www, well, World Wide Web. You need to understand how the websites work. What is a client and server communication? Just the basic understanding how to create a client code. You should already have some JavaScript experience where you wrote a web application. Next, we have web components. Well, Angular will teach you how to create Angular components, but we can create web components as well. And the concept behind web components and the components created in Angular are similar. So if you understand the concept why there are web components, then it's going to help you to understand components in Angular. Next, we have this MVC. Well, it's a model view controller pattern. There's lots of frameworks which follow these MVC patterns. So if you have experience with MVC framework in the past, then this is definitely going to help you. The bottom line is that you need to understand the basics about web development using plain JavaScript, and it's going to help you if you understand any MVC framework. Now, if you understand client and server communication, also how the browser act on HTML and how do we generate HTML dynamically using JavaScript. So all that knowledge is going to help you in this Angular course. I'm not going to explain to you basic stuff, how the web work, because this is an Angular course, and in about a couple hours, I'm going to make you Angular developer, and I'll show you how you can learn more by just using Angular official documentation. You won't have to watch any other video after this video. So yeah, clock is ticking. Let's get started with Angular in 2021. As soon as possible, become Angular developer. Let's do it. We're going to start by looking at project setup and tooling available in Angular. You got to go to Angular.io, and this is the official website for Angular. You will find all the resources here, documentations, new features, and blog about Angular. So this is a great resource. I would say this is the only resource that you should be visiting when dealing with Angular. It's going to have a lot of information instead of going to Stack Overflow and just copy pasting the solution. Every framework out there has something called command line interface, which is a utility that helps you to set up project very, very easily. So once you have a node installed, then you need to install Angular CLI. I'm going to open terminal, and I'm using Mac. If you are on a Windows, the process is the same. So on terminal, I'm just simply going to type a command here. I'm going to type npm install -g at Angular/CLI. Now, where I'm getting this command, this is the problem with a lot of videos. They don't really show you how they are finding these commands. Well, we're going to go to docs. We're going to go to reference, and we're going to find this CLI reference. Click on overview, and here's a command for installing CLI. So it tells you how to install CLI. npm install -g Angular/CLI. That will install Angular CLI for us. While installing Angular CLI, it's asking us some questions. It's basically asking you, would you like to share anonymous users data with Angular team at Google under Google privacy policy? I will just say, no man, don't touch my data. I'll press enter. At this stage, we have Angular CLI installed, and it's ready for us to use. If I type ng space -- version, that will tell me the version of Angular CLI, which is 11.2.8, and it tells me the node version, and also it will tell you some of the packages that were installed. So congratulations, you have Angular CLI. Very brief introduction to CLI. CLI is a command line utility which is available for pretty much every framework out there, like Express, Vue, React. They all have CLI. So what CLI does for us, it provides us with a lot of commands which are very, very useful. For example, if you want to create a fresh project with Angular, and the boilerplate code will be like, I don't know, hundreds of files, okay? And all that configuration that you will have to do if the CLI was not there to help you out. So CLI has a command called ng-new, which will help us to create a new Angular project. And CLI is basically a bunch of commands, a bunch of scripts that are provided by the framework, which helps you to create like, framework specific things. Like in Angular, we have components, module, pipes, and we can all create those things using Angular CLI. Now also, it will help us to run a development server as well. It also has scripts for running a test and a lot more. So CLI is a very common terminology. It's available for pretty much every framework out there. And if you have a basic understanding of web development, you should already understand that. Show you the reference for Angular CLI and show you some of the common commands that we're going to need throughout this video, but also please spend some time onto the reference and learn more about those commands. Some of the common ones I'll show you right now, but you need to go through the list yourself because this video is going to teach you how to learn more, and I want you to become Angular developer instead of me spending time taking a look at every single command separately and showing you separately. You are a developer already, so you should be able to run these commands and read the description straight away and then understand what they do. So let's get going with the Angular CLI reference. Very quickly, we're going to touch base to the documentation and show you where are the references for Angular CLI. Direct URL to Angular CLI would be this angular.io/CLI, but you want to click on this docs and then click on this reference and then go to CLI reference. So click on overview, that'll give you the command to install and some of the basic workflow that you can go through. Now, a couple of commands that we'll take a look at is going to be this ng-new command, which will help us to create a new application. So you start with ng, a command, and the name of the application, and then some of the options. Now you can go through the list of these options available to you, but I'll show you this one, --dry run. So this basically runs through and reports activity without writing out the result. So if you want to just try out some commands without actually writing out the results, this is a really good option. Now take a look at other options, descriptions here, and then you will be able to understand what they do. Not spending much time here. A couple of other commands like ng-build. So it basically compiles an Angular application to an output directory called dist, and then you will have that build running through ng-serve. So here's the ng-serve command. So it builds and runs your application and rebuilding off on the file changes. So very, very simple. Some of the options here as well. For example, here we have some option for specifying the host, if it's going to live reload, or it's going to open the browser. And if it's going to open the browser, then you can specify which browser to use. There should be an option here. So yeah, well, take a look at these options here, guys. It's very simple. A couple of commands, ng-generate. Well, we already talked about, we have application, we have classes, components, directives, enums, guards, interceptors, interface, library, module, pipe, resolvers. So all of these can be created manually by right-clicking and creating a new file and just applying the boilerplate code. But why would you do that? Because this ng-generate command followed by the sub option, you can just create that straight away. Like if you want to create a class, just say ng-generate and then use the semantics. Well, these are called semantics. So use like class and then the options that are provided here. Okay, so dry run is here as well. So basically this will generate you this directive components or all of these options straight away. That saves us a lot of time. So do not go and create these classes and use the boilerplate code. Try to learn more about Angular CLI and learn about this command. So while we proceed with the video, I'll show you some more commands, but here's the reference, read about it, and then you're good to go with Angular CLI. Let's go and quickly create a project using Angular CLI using ng-new command. So let's go to the terminal and we're going to use ng-new, and I'm going to give it a name tutorial, and I'll say dry run. Enter. And you'll notice it's going to ask you some questions. Do you want to enforce stricter type checking and stricter bundle in a workspace? And I'll say yes. Would you like to use Angular routing? So you say yes, it will save you a lot of time because you don't want to deal with the routing by yourself. Let Angular CLI do things for you. So routing is like you navigate between pages in Angular. So yes, now it's going to ask you an option to choose this CSS version. So you can go with this plain CSS, or you can go with the Sass/stylus. So usually the best one is SCSS. Enter, and there you go. So it says create all of these files for you, and it says note the .run flag means no changes were made. So if I type ls, you won't see that folder there. I'm actually going to use a mk directory. I'll just say Angular and cd Angular, so we don't really need to see the other files. Let's use ng-new command, and I'm going to say my app And it's this time I'm not going to use dry run. So enter. I'll say yes, yes, use this as, and it is now installing all the packages required for Angular. In terms of text editor, we can use VS Code or WebStorm. That's my favorite, but I'll just use the VS Code, guys. Let's open the folder and quickly go to the file structure. We'll go to desktop, Angular, my app, and I'm going to open this. Now, one more problem that I've done is because my desktop is synced with iCloud, so I'm just going to have to move this project into some other directory. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so that's a folder that was created by Angular CLI. So let's quickly go through what we have. So we got these TypeScript configuration files. We got a package.json, which I'm going to open. And here we got some dependency for Angular. So Angular animation, common compiler, core forms. All of these are dependencies. Now we also have this development dependencies here. So you can take a look at what we have. We also have this Angular.json file, which is a configuration file for this Angular project. So here's the configuration file. Quickly going to show you what the configuration is all about. So if you look at right above here we got the projects, and then we've got this app, which is the name of our project. And then we also have this something called configuration. A configuration is something that you can specify in the environment file. So we got two configuration. Let's say you have an application for development and for deployment. So you can specify configuration in a prod environment file and then environment file for your development. So here we got this configuration stuff happening here. And we got some other options which you have to read by yourself. And I'll show you where you can find the reference. Let's go to Safari, and here is Angular Workspace configuration. Now you got to go to Reference and click on Workspace and Projects, and then here you have Workspace configuration. And that's what it exactly going to tell you. At the top level of Angular.json, there is a workspace and a project section. So if we go to VS Code, here we got this project section, and that's what I was talking about. Now take a look at these options, and also it will tell you all the options that are available in that file and how do you use them. So basically this is just a configuration file for configuring your Angular project within a workspace, and also configuration, and then you deal with your architects and build the targets in that file as well. It's a very common practice in a lot of frameworks. They have a configuration file. So in the VS Code back. So that's a very important file. Take a look at this. There are really cool options available in that file. Now we have a karma.conf.js file. This is another configuration file for our test runner. TypeScript is obviously the must-have, so you should know about tsconfig file. Is a TypeScript configuration for Angular. The tslint, the JSON file as well. Well, it's kind of deprecated in TypeScript because they're using ESLint now, not TSLint, but the file is still here if you want to modify that. Git ignore, it's a Git repository by default, so you have a Git ignore file, and they've added some of the files like node modules for you. So if you didn't have this Angular CLI, you would have to create all of these files by yourself and all of this configuration by yourself. And imagine the pain. Okay, so let's go to the source folder. A source folder is where your code resides. So all of your code is in a source folder. You go to app folder, which is your application code for your Angular project. Then you have these assets, which will have all the images or files that you want to use in your project. Environment files I've already shown you. Here is a configuration for environment files. And we also have this SCSS file, which basically a SAS file, which we choose, right? When we were creating a project, we choose SCSS for our styles. The main file that we want to talk about is a main.ts file. And this file is basically an entry file for your Angular application. It is going to create your application. So here you see a code here. It says Platform Browser Dynamics Bootstrap App Module. Now, every application in Angular starts from the root level module, which is like a parent module of all. And by default, when you use Angular CLI, it creates this app module for you automatically. Now, app module is coming from this /app app.module, which is this folder right here. And here you can see we have this file called app.module. So in TypeScript, when you import, you don't really have to specify the extension for the file. Now it says if the environment.production, then enable prod. So this is another function that Angular provides you to generate to enable the production level configuration. So this is the main file, guys. You need to make sure you have the module that is defined here. All right, so that's your main file. Now also, every application in Angular or any web application needs to have a HTML file. So here's a parent index.html file. We have a tag called app-root and app-root. So this is like a parent tag. So by using Angular, we're teaching a browser to learn more of these tags. So everything will be inside this app root. So that's the main index.html is the main UI file for us as well. Now, if you look at the module, here's a module file, which we will have a detailed discussion about. We have one component that a module requires. And here we have this app component. And then we also have the spec files. Spec files are the test files using Karma Runner and just as our testing framework. We choose these routing options. So Angular CLI create this routing file for us automatically as well. Now, component is built of 4 files: HTML file, style file, which is SCS file, and then TypeScript file. And then you can also add the spec file. Okay. So here we have this. We have 4 files here, and I'm just going to zoom into it. So app.component.html, app.component.sass file, app.component.spec file, and app.component.types file. So these 4 files are basically making up one component, and in that parent module, we're using that. So if I go to app component, you'll see some code here. This is a boilerplate code written by Angular CLI. Now, so far, we understood the file structure of our project, how do we create one. We looked at the configuration file for Angular, and we also looked at some of the main files like index and main file. We're going to use CLI to build and run our application. We're going to go to terminal, and I'm going to simply type ng build. Once I do that, it is going to read the angular.json file for a configuration, and it's going to compile the project using Angular core and all of these packages, and it's going to generate a folder called a dist. You can rename that folder by going to angular.json file, and I'm actually going to search for dist. And you see here in the architect build options, we have this output path set to dist/app. Now you can change that if you don't want to call your build folder as dist. So you see all the configuration are here. We have this dist folder that is a compiled version of our application. If you look at this map.js, this is the whole code. We got a map file as well to help us to debug as well. Now let's go quickly run another command ng serve. And I'm going to I'm going to just say --no open. So this will help me to open the browser myself and go to the exec port instead of it is going to open a default browser, and I have many browsers in the computer. So that's why I'm using this --no open flag. Now it says generating the application. Now it says compiled successfully. And also it tells you open the browser with the local host port 4200. So let's go to Safari, open a new tab, localhost 4200, enter, and there you go. Our application is running. So yeah, congratulations. Before we move to the next topic, I would like to take you back to the documentation. In the reference, you have this workspace project structure. Click on that, and then I want you to read through this workspace configuration, but also read about the dependencies that you get by default. We also have a configuration for TypeScript here, so I would highly recommend to read about the config files for TypeScript, which is your main program language in Angular. You're gonna have to understand that. We have a browser support, so we got support for Chrome, Firefox, Edge, IE, Safari, iOS, and Android. So read about polyfill. So Angular is built on the latest standards of web platform targeting such as wide range of browser. So polyfill will help you to make your application compatible with the older versions of any browser. So yeah, read about that. Strict mode, that's very, very important. You have to read about this. Make sure you read about it. Pause this video and read about it, and then continue with the video. Back to VS Code. If you look at the terminal, a terminal is constantly looking for changes in your file for your Angular project. So I'm going to move it down a bit. I'm going to open a file called app component.html file. And all of these file is basically having this UI for your application. So let's start by removing some of the stuff from the bottom. So let's go all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to, let's say, remove this SVG. Save, and you'll notice here in your terminal, you'll see it says 3 unchained chunks built at this time, hashed with this, and it says compiled successfully. If you look at application, we should have a refreshed page automatically, and then with the changes. So I'm going to try deleting quite a bit now. So let's say I'm going to delete this footer. And also let's delete some of the tags. I don't want to leave the empty tag there. So let's save the file. The compiler is done, and you can see now it says app is running, but all that page is gone now. So yeah, let's clean this up. I'm going to delete pretty much everything. Deleting the whole content on app component. If we save this file and go to a page, I'll refresh, and you can see there is nothing visible on the page. So just to make sure that we are looking at the application, we're just going to write a h1 tag, and I'm going to say hello world. Save the file. Now you'll see hello world. So right now we have application running, built on Angular. We looked at CLI reference. We also looked at how to create a project, how to run it in the browser. So from now on, we're going to understand some core concept of Angular, like modules, components, and services. It's a platform for building single-page client application using HTML and TypeScript. And Angular is written in TypeScript. It implements the core optional functionality as a TypeScript libraries. So you should be able to write TypeScript before watching this video, and I've mentioned that in a prerequisite of this video. There are three main concepts that we need to talk about in Angular: modules, components, and services. There are more, but we will talk about them later in the video. So every application, Angular application, require at least one root level module, which we have this app module. Now this root level module will be used to bootstrap the application, means to create an application. Now Angular modules are different than JavaScript plain modules. I'm not going to go into details for what is the difference, but let's see what is the Angular module do. We have a class. All of these three things, services, components, and modules, are basically TypeScript classes. How do we tell Angular compiler that we are creating a module, or we're creating a component, or we're creating a service? So we do that by using decorators. Angular provides some decorators which help us to provide a metadata for that particular class to Angular compiler. And right now you can see in the app module we have a decorator, which is this ng module. So in TypeScript, decorator starts with @ with the name of, and then the parentheses, passing an object which is having some keys like declarations, imports, providers, and a bootstrap. Now the bootstrap key is going to tell Angular compiler that, hey, use this module to bootstrap the application, and this key makes this module as a root module of the Angular application. And here we are just basically creating a class. So once you decorate the class with ng module decorator, that becomes a module in Angular. About these keys that we're providing, like declarations, imports, providers, and bootstrap. We already talked about bootstrap. Now Angular module can contain some components. Well, when you create a component, you have to put that into a module, and then the module's responsibility is to use that component and its views and its functionality depending on where you're going to use it. So all the components that we're going to create for app module and you want to inject those into this will go into declarations. Now also we will have some pipes and directives that will go into declaration as well. Import key is responsible for importing other modules. So a module can export their functionality and other modules can import them as well. Just to keep it simple, for example, you are trying to create a functionality, let's say a storage functionality in your application, and you want to share that across different modules. So what you will do, you will create a reusable module and you will export that with its own functionality, such as maybe creating a service. We take a look at what is service, but let's say you want to export that functionality across other modules. This is why we have a concept of shared modules in Angular. So some modules can be used as shared module, which means they have a common functionality that is required in multiple places of your application. So you design them into shared module and then use them from that particular module by exporting and importing. So all the modules that you will import will go here. For example, right now we are using a browser module. A browser module is responsible for our DOM. So we want to create an application for a browser, and this browser module will help us to actually render that all the shade module or child module or services components, the whole application onto the browser. App routing module. So every framework represents a concept called routing. So you go from one page to another page by clicking on a button or by any user event or by any event by the application. So routing is created or managed by a routing module in Angular. So that's why we are importing. Giving you an example how this is going to help us. Well, if we go to this file, app routing module, now you see it's just a class and it is decorated with ng module. Now it has some a key that it was not available in app module. So what is this? So basically it is saying I am going to import this router module for root, and we specify this root array, and then it is going to export a router module as well. So if any module is going to import this app routing module, will automatically import this router module. Sometimes you have 5 different modules and you want to export them once. So what do? You create a 6th module, import all 5 of them into that, and then just export that. And then importing one that module will help you to import all the other its dependencies. So right now this is what we're doing, and router module is not created by a user because it's coming from this package called Angular core. Okay, and we got this ng module getting imported from Angular core package as well. So this is our own custom made app routing module, which is just exporting a router module. So let's go back to app module. Now we got some services. Services are some classes which are decorated with injectable decorator. And those services, what they help us to do is to write a logic or any functionality which is not directly associated with the view. A view is what you see on the browser, okay? What's the UI element that you see, that's called view. So there is a logic behind that view which is responsible for rendering that view, and then we can put that functionality into a service. So the way we create a service is by creating a class, injecting using a decorator called injectable, and then just importing it. Now I would like to create a service right now to show you how we do that. I'm going to go and create a new terminal, and I'll take you to a documentation for CLI, and we are going to use this ng generate, and I'm going to create this service. Okay, so that service that we're going to use So the way we create this is by using ngg service and then the name of that. And then with options, you can actually specify the path where you're trying to create that. So let's use that. So type ngg service, and I'm just going to use a service called storage. Okay. And I will just enter, and you will see it says create source/app storage.service.spec.ts file, which is a testing file, and then the storage file with the there's a convention for all the services. You type the name of that storage.service.ts. So here you go, we got this service there. Now if I go to service, you will see we just marking this with injectable decorator, and here's some properties. We will take a look at them in details once we talk about just services and create a service. Okay, so go back to Angular module, and the way we're going to import that service is going to go into this providers array. So I'm going to press enter here, and I'm going to start typing storage. And now we should see this storage service. So VS Code is smart enough to tell us, hey, are you trying to import this storage service? I'll just say yes, enter. And now what happened is it imports the storage from this package, which is at the root level of our application, and the name for that. And we are going to put that into this providers array. So all the services are going to go into this providers array. So we know declarations, we know imports, we know services, we know Bootstrap. Now, let's say you want to export this app module. What you'll do is you will have to use export and then have this going. Now, you're not going to export this app module because it's a root level module and you cannot export it. So we have to delete this key. The best part about this video is actually showing you way to get more knowledge about ng modules. You got to learn, but how do you explore more? Because covering that ng module in about 20 minutes or 15 minutes is not enough. So I want to take you to a documentation where you will learn in detail information about ng modules, and not many videos do that. The best way to learn is from Angular documentation, which is an official documentation. So let's explore some ng module documentation. We'll go back to documentation, and I would like you to go to this reference page and then click on conceptual reference. Click on that, and then we go to Angular concepts. I want you to look at this intro to module. And after watching this Angular module part of this video, I would like you to read this so you understand more about it. So here are some of the keys that we already discussed. So we talked about declaration, which is like component directives and pipes belong to this ng module that will go into declaration. Export, the subset of declaration that should be visible and usable in the component template of other ng modules. Imports, other modules whose export classes are needed by the component. Providers, create a service. We did that, and we put that service in the providers. Bootstrap. So this is a main application view called a root component, which hosts all the other app views. Only root ng module should be set the Bootstrap property. Okay, so we looked at this bit, but I would still like you to look at some of the other documentation here, especially this ng module versus JavaScript module. That will give you more knowledge about what is the difference between that. Section called Angular libraries within this documentation, and I would like to point out this browser module from here. All it's saying is you can import libraries using JavaScript import statement, and I'm going to click on this browser module. Once I click on the browser module, here you see it's belonging to API Angular/platform browser. So Angular not only used for web application, it is used for other types of application like desktop application or mobile application using Ionic. So that's why there is a platform within Angular. So if you are creating a web application, you need to have this browser module. I'm going to read out this bit here. So it says export required infrastructure for all Angular apps, including by default in all Angular apps created with the CLI with new command. and it re-exports common module and application module, which are responsible for creating an application, making the exports and providers available to all applications. So there are some information about these providers, which I don't want you to stress about this for now, but just remember that browser module is required for all browser-based application if you're using Angular for that. Also, there is an API reference. So if you go to API reference, I would like you to click on this all and go to decorators. And here we have the API reference for ng module. So here I would like you to go through this as well, where it will tell you have the key called schemas, like that, what they do. You will have a entry component, which is another very, very important thing in Angular. Okay, I want you to read this, not at this stage, but once you finish this video, I would like you to read this reference as well. Talk about components. Components are one of the most important topic in Angular. The word component does not only belong to Angular, but it is also available in other Node.js front-end framework like Vue or React. We also have a web component. So if you have experience with component, you should be able to know what is the basic concept behind a component. Let's take a look at in Angular, how do we create component and what it can do for you. I'm going to make it very, very simple, not going to speak Angular language, but a plain English to make you, understand what is a component. So we talked about decorators. Here we have one component called app component. Now, every Angular application requires a root level component, and by convention, app component is usually called the root level component. Now, in this component, we first of all have this decorator, which has an object, which tells the selector of it, template URL, and style URL. Selector is something that that Angular will understand that where to put this component. Components can be used in other components. So we have a child components and parents components. Parent components can have multiple child components. So the way we tell Angular where to inject this component is by using this selector, which in this case is app-root. We have a key template URLs. So component is made up of three things: a TypeScript class and a HTML view and a style file. So if you have an HTML file, you want to associate that with component. The way you do that is by template URL and put that URL for that HTML file into this. Style URLs, we have an array for that, so you can have a multiple style files for that particular component. Now we got this property here, hello world. It's a plain TypeScript class. You have this property for that class, which is like a variable, and you have that value set to it. Now component can talk to its TypeScript file and read data from it and also execute functions within the class file. Read some documentation for components so you know where to go and explore more and get the full information about components. After understanding the concept, then I will show you how to implement that documentation into the code. So let's go to Safari, and here we go to Intro to Basic Concept. Here it says every Angular application has at least one root level component, which by convention is app component. We have this decorator. It says decorator identifies class immediately below as its component and provides a template and related template specific metadata. Okay, so we already know what is the metadata: selector, template URL, and also styles URL. But let's go to this documentation here, Intro to Components. I'm going to click on that. And here it'll tell you some, basic information about it, which I'll show you. Here is a component and metadata. So you need to read this. This is very, very important. Most of the things we will talk about it, but having that text available to you and you can go back to this, it's amazing. We go down and here we talked about selector. Okay, so it's a CSS selector that tells Angular and create an instance of this component wherever it finds the corresponding tag in HTML template. So if you have that app root in other component, now this is, in this case, it's basically a root level component, so I wouldn't say that. But if you have a component which you want to inject into a different component, you will use its selector, and that component will be injected into other component. Now read about this, I've already explained to you this. Now we also have this providers array. The reason why Angular doesn't put that by default when you create a component is because you have multiple ways to inject providers. You can have a root level providers, you can have a component level provider. So if you want to have a component level provider, you use that providers array. And so let me read this actually. So it says an array of providers for services that the component requires. So in this example, this tells Angular how to provide the hero service instance that components constructor uses to get the list of heroes and displayed. So if you want to have a service, for example, if we go to the code and you want to say, hey, I would like this service to be injected into app component. So the way you do that is by adding a comma here and go providers, and that will be array, and I'll type storage service, and that will be part of this component now. But the reason why I wouldn't do that is because this key here. So it has provided in root. So this tells Angular, hey, go ahead and make this storage service available at the root level of your Angular application, which means all the components will have that available for them automatically at the root level. So you will not have to inject this as a provider array. So what I'll do, I'll get rid of this bit here, and I will get rid of this as well. Now, this is still a service which is injectable in our application, but this is not available now at the root level. Okay, so to be able to make it available at root level, you need to have that provided in key. Press Command Z to undo that. So I would like you to have this at the root level, and because we're going to use this in the future in this video. So let's go back to app component, and I'm going to get rid of this providers as well. So next topic, we'll go to documentation. Here we have this templates and views. You can read it if you want to, but I'm going to explain this very simple way. We have template syntax. Don't worry about this for now. The next topic we're going to talk about is data binding. So let's say you want to read some values from this TypeScript file into your HTML file, which is this one. So I'll go to HTML file. For example, here we have statically written hello world, but I would like this to be coming from that TypeScript file. We go to documentation, and here it tells, without a framework, you would be responsible for pushing data values into HTML controls and turning user responses into actions and values. That is a very lengthy task. To make it very easy for us to read the data from that TypeScript file. Now, we are going to look at this concept called interpolation. Okay, so it displays the component property value within the HTML file, and the syntax for that is using these curly brackets. Okay, now I'm going to read this title. Now you'll see the VS Code is giving me suggestion that you can use a title from this. So if I change this to just T, save this file, and if I go here, now I'm going to have to make it T. Okay, now if I make sure that my application is running, so it says app component is declared here. Okay, now if you look at this, we actually got this removed by mistake, so I'm going to just undo this bit. Okay, I'll save this, and I'm going to just make it T. Save the file, and you'll say it's compiled successfully. Let's go and refresh, and you are still seeing hello world. Now, instead of changing the value from here, I could go to app component. I'll just say, this is the way we do data binding in Angular. Save the file, and you'll see this is the way we do data binding in Angular. So see how easy it is to read the values for a property from a class and show that into your view. documentation, and the next topic we take a look at is event binding. But in the list there was a property binding. I'll read that for you. It says passes the value of from the parent to the child. So we have not created a second component yet, but this is in the future in the video we'll talk about this property binding with input and output decorator. But what we can do here is event binding. So in web application, what happens when the user clicks on a button, or what happens when the user types something, what happens when a user drag and drop something. All of those are events in web development. So the way we do that is by creating a function in TypeScript app component file. So I'll just say handle event function, and I will just leave that empty, but I'll just do console.log, and I'll just say button clicked. What is the spelling of clicked? I think this is okay. I'll save the file. We go to HTML file. Now I'm going to use this plain button. Okay. Now in the button, we can use this click event. So I'll use this click, and then equal to, we will use single quotes or preferably double quotes, and we'll type handle event, and that's it. I'll save the file. Now this button will be very, very small because you can see here, this is the button, but we don't have anything there. So for that, I'll just click, I'll just add a text here, say, click me. Save the file, and we have this button now, click me. I'm going to open the console for Safari. Let's zoom in a bit, and I'm going to click on this button. Once I click on that, you will see it says button click. So that means it is listening for that event. So click, 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 click. It is going to show you the logs. So that's really cool. But how about having a different event? So right now here, you can use pretty much all kinds of JavaScript events. Like, let's just say key down. I will save the file, and I'm going to just press key down. Key down. Doesn't work because this is a button. So if I type here, type here, type here, no key down. What is happening here? Well, this is not going to read the key down. So for that, we need to have an input state. So I'll type this input, and I will just close this bit. And within this input, I'm going to use a placeholder, and I'll just say hello. And then I'm going to use this key down event, and I'm going to use this handle event. Okay, now let's take a look. So we have this hello as a placeholder. I'm going to press key down, and you will see this button is basically getting incremented. I press the key down, and you'll see that event is triggering. So you see, depending on the element, HTML element you're using, you can have JavaScript events right here. Another concept in Angular is called two-way binding. So what two-way binding is basically, so let's say you have this t variable. Let's change that to title first. We'll make it easier to understand. So title, we go to app component, and we're going to change the name of this title. Save this file, and then save this file. Okay. Now, let's just say you would like to update this value of title, which is from TypeScript file, using an input field. But you want also update the value within TypeScript file as well, and also show that file from that input element as well. So the way we do that is by using this called ng model. So I'll go up a little bit. So here's the concept ng model. So this is like a two-way binding used mainly in template-driven forms. So forms are everywhere in web application, in mobile application, which is the way to grab data from a user. And that's what we have in pretty much all the web applications. So we have this two-way data binding property that will allow us from input field to update the data into the TypeScript file property. So let's go and try that. Now I'm going to use this ng model, okay? And we are going to use parentheses around it. and square brackets equal to, and I'm going to use title. Now, once I save the file, it is going to give us a problem. It says occurs in template component app component. Now it says this title property is not available. So if I hover over in VS Code, it says cannot bind to ng model since it is not a noun property of input. Well, it is not yet. So the reason for that is because we need to use form modules in Angular, which is like comes with Angular, which will enable this two-way binding. And that form module has to be available in the components module. To go to app module, and we want to make sure that we import a form module. The form module will extend our Angular app functionality and make everything available related to forms, and also make it available the ng module. Now I want to talk a little bit about structural directives and attribute directives after showing you this. So here in the imports, I'll add a comma and I'll say forms module. And right now we can see in the import, it is importing from this form module, which is coming from this Angular forms package. And now if I go to app component, and you will see no longer we have that error. Right now what's happening is we have this input field, placeholder is hello, but it's going to get overridden with the value. So ng model will add the value for title within this input field, and as soon as we update element, this will update the actual value on the TypeScript file, which is again getting read here. So if I go to application, from input field, I would like to remove some text. So let's say if I press backspace, you'll see I'm removing the word, and it is getting updated in the title property as well. So it's basically two-way binding from title property. So if I write something two-way binding, and if I click on this click me button, right now it doesn't do anything, but let's add that functionality as well. I would like to go to this handle event, okay? And I would like to console log that title property as well. So add a comma, add a space, and then we'll just say this dot title. So this is a TypeScript. You should already know this. You refer with this keyword the properties of your component TypeScript file. I'll save this, and if I go to app component now, I'm going to just get rid of this key down event for now. Let's save this file as well. Now I'm going to click on this click me. Click me doesn't do nothing, so we'll go and then save this file as well. Go back to app component, and I would like to change this key down event to click event. That's what the problem was. So let's go back to the code. I'll click on that, and you'll see the value that is getting printed is this dot. This is the way we do data binding in Angular. Now we're missing this text here, we do data binding, so it says we data binding. So I'll change that to do, and you see it is updated, but it also updated the value in the TypeScript file. So if I now click on click me button, you will see here, it says this is the way we do data binding. So right here, you can see it says do data binding. So I'm going to just remove this whole text, and I click again. Now you'll see no text is available for title property. So that is called two-way binding. So we'll go back to the code, and I'm going to now show you one more thing. So if we look at this property binding, okay, so it says passes the value of selected hero from parent to the property hero of a child component. So now instead of using this bit like that, so we got this parenthesis and a square bracket. But the way we do the property binding is by just using square brackets. So let's say if I go ahead and then change this to just property binding, I'll save this file and we'll go back. Now you can see in application, it is now reading from that value. But as soon as I update, it is not going to update that title property within the TypeScript file. So click here, you'll see no change here. But it actually read the title property. So if I go and refresh the page, I'll go back to the code app component. and I will just say, this is the way, and you will see this is the way, and then this is the way. So the way you read the value within the input element from the TypeScript file is by using this property binding. Okay, so that's the difference. So this ng model with this property binding and a parenthesis within it, that will be two-way binding. So that's a two-way binding concept in Angular. Topic we are going to discuss in Angular is called pipes. Very, very simple. It'll take about like 5 minutes to explain that. Now let's just say here we have this is the way value set to title. We'll go back to HTML5, and here we want to make sure we uppercase the value of a title. The way we do that is by using pipes. You can create a custom pipes in Angular, and you can also use the pre-built pipes which are available in Angular framework, and the uppercase pipe is available. And there's a syntax for to use the pipes in data binding. So I'll press spacebar here after title and use this pipe symbol. Once I press the pipe symbol, then I can start typing uppercase, and you will see it is going to give a suggestion that uppercase pipe is available. Let's click on that. I will save the file. Let's go back, and now you'll see we have the value. This is the way uppercased automatically for us. If I click on that, you will see the actual value in the TypeScript file is not uppercase. It is still the value. I'm not really a fan of Safari showing the value like that. So, but you can see the value, right? So now it is being uppercased by using the pipe. We'll take a look at the documentation for pipe. So it says Angular pipe lets you declare display value transformation in your template HTML. And that's what we did. So a class with the add pipe defines a function that transforms input value to output values for a display in a view. Angular comes with the built-in pipes as well, like this date pipe. We have this currency pipe. So the way we find all the pipes available in Angular is by going to this API reference. I'll open that in a new tab, and I'm going to go to type, and I'm going to change that to pipe. Now these are all the pre-built pipes available in Angular. So which pipe we use? We use this uppercase pipe. We also have this currency pipe, key value pipe, which is another very important one, date pipe, which is used a lot, lowercase pipe, title case pipe, and we have decimal pipe, async pipe, JSON pipe. So for example, this JSON pipe is going to be very, very helpful as well. Let's go back to the code, and I'm going to use a JSON value. So we'll just say JSON value equal to, we create an object, and I'll say A property to hello, B property to world. Now, if I go ahead and then use this, let's create another copy of it, and I'm going to say JSON value, and I'm going to just remove that pipe, save the file. Now you'll see it is saying object. Well, this is an object. To actually read this JSON, we need to use a JSON pipe, which is very helpful. You can create a custom pipe. We'll take a look at that. But right now, if I go and add a pipe symbol, and I'll say, go ahead and use this as a JSON, I'll save the file. Now you will see it says A, hello, B, hello. So you see how easy it is to show the JSON in your view by using JSON pipe. Let's go to the documentation. Now within the JSON pipe, here's a usage node. We already seen that, but you go ahead and then take a look at what are the example they are giving you. We'll go back, and one of the other important pipe is, let me go back to the list, date pipe. Okay, this is going to be your best friend when you're working with dates and time in Angular. Best friend, let me tell you, a best friend. So we'll go back to the code. I am going to go and create a new date. So within the property, we will create new date equal to new date object. Okay, so if I go ahead and we'll create another one, and we'll just say new date. And this is a JSON. I'm going to remove that, save the file, and make sure you save this component file as well. We take a look at that. Now you will see we have this date getting printed. And to format this date, we can use date pipe. So let's go to documentation, and we have this date after the pipe symbol. We can also use this formatter like time zone and locale. So that's going to help us a lot. Let's go to the usage. It says predefined format option. So for example, if you want to show your date like that, June 15, 2015, and the time, you can simply say medium. So the way you specify the format is by using this formatter. So let's go and take a look at that. So we go to HTML, and I'm going to start with the pipe symbol, and I'm going to say it's a date file, colon, and then single quotes, and I'm going to type medium. Okay, and that's a predefined formatter that we're using. I'll save the file. I'll make sure my code is running. Let's go back to the code application, and here you can see it is being formatted for us. So Angular provides a predefined formatter for us. So let's say full, long, short. So I'll use this short one. I'll change the medium to short, save the file, and you'll see it is being formatted for short. I have a custom formatter in DatePipe. So if you go down, you see here it says custom format options. So let's say you would like to have a month, and you would like to have a day of the month, and then you also want to have something like hours. So the way we can do that is by using this M for month. So let's go to date. I'll just M colon D date, and then H for hour. I'll save the file. We go and take a look at that. So here it says for month, D is basically not a formatted. So let's find what is for the day. So day of the month is lowercase d. It's case sensitive. So let's say lowercase d, save, and you'll see 4/11/16. So for month, 11th is a day, date. So you can see here it's 11th April, and then an hour, which is 4 o'clock right now. So yeah, so you can have this custom formatter, and I would like you to take a look at all of these pipes, which are really, really important and will save your time and pain in Angular. Before we move to the next topic, I want to show you how you can create a custom pipe using a pipe decorator. You could go and create a new file, and we can just say truncate.pipe.ts. You can start writing code to create this file as a pipe, and all you need is going to be this pipe symbol. Now, I'm not going to do that because Angular CLI is pretty good. It helps us to create the pipes very, very simple. So I'm going to remove this file. Let's remove it. We open terminal, and I'm going to open a new terminal. And here I'm going to use ngg pipe, and I'm going to say truncate. Enter, and it is going to create a pipe for me. Now it says it created these two files, pipe.spec.ts file, pipe.truncate.pipe.ts file, and also it says update app/app module. So you see Angular CLI is very smart. It actually updated my app module with this truncate pipe, as you can see here. So now it's automatically imported for app module. The way Angular CLI is going to do that is it's going to look for a module within that path. So if it finds the module within the path where are you going to create the pipe file, it is automatically going to update that module. But if we go to documentation, so I'll go to CLI documentation. Let me go to ng generate. And here I'm going to go to pipe command. Now here it says ngg pipe in the name, but we also have options. So if I say skip import, so this one, okay, so it says do not import this pipe into the owning module. So you need to use this flag if you don't want that to automatically update your module. How cool is that? Let's go back to the code. Now we have that pipe imported. We can use this pipe, but let's go and take a look at the class file first. First of all, we are importing this pipe and pipe transform from this Angular core package. we decorating our class with the pipe decorator, and then the object is going to take the name for the pipe, which is truncate. We're also going to implement this pipe transform within our truncate pipe class. And that pipe transform requires this transform function, which is going to help us to modify a data which is going to be put into this pipe before it is displayed on our view. Modify this. I'm going to remove this destructuring, and I'm going to type for values any, and then we can just say return any. Now here, I'm going to change this line with this code. So here we are going to return value.split.splice02, join this. So this is going to truncate after 2 words. So let's save this file, and we are going to use that in our app component. I'm going to give space, and then I will just use h1. And I'll say, hello world, how are you? Okay, now I'm going to use the pipe symbol, and I'm going to use this truncate pipe. So now it's not reading at this state. So what I'll do is I'll go to this pipe symbol, save this, copy this, and paste it here. I'm going to save this. If we look at our first terminal, you'll see if we go here, it says, hello world, how are you doing? And truncate. So it's not actually reading that pipe. The reason for that is because we're not using template binding or data binding. So that has to come from this bit. Okay, you cannot use that in a plain string. So what I'll do is I'll go to the title property, and I'm going to say, hello world, how are you doing? Save this file. Let's go here and set up uppercase. I'm going to use this truncate. And let's get rid of this line as well. Save it. Now you'll see 2 words, and now it's showing ... Okay, so you see we created a custom pipe with this code. So it's up to you how you want to modify the data. We'll just do console.log, and I'll just say value, and you'll see what value it's getting in the console, and it's transforming and returning that value. So let's go ahead and expand the size of our console. We're going to refresh the page, and you will see here truncatepipe.ts file right here, and it says it is getting this hello world, how are you doing, but it is returning that bit. Okay, so it's a plain JavaScript. You can do whatever you want to do and create a custom pipe. So that's where the pipe comes in. They're really helpful in Angular. Topic is going to be about services and dependency injection. This is one of the most important topic as well. You need to master it before you can become an Angular developer. So I'm going to make it very, very simple for you to understand what is a service and what it can do for you. So we talked about new modules, we talked about components. Why we need a service? Well, if you look at a component TS file, you can do all kind of logic here. For example, we have these functions, we have our properties, we can do pretty much everything here. But sometimes you want to have a functionality which should be available for more than one component, and that's a common functionality. Services allow you to reuse the logic, reuse the functionality into different parts of application, and it's the best way to organize your code as well. So let's say you have an API which you want to talk to. You want to create a service for that instead of rewriting that get and post method in every single component. It is going to be very tedious to do the error handling because there are many places that you have the same code, so you're duplicating the code. So what we can do is we can actually create a service and use that service into our components wherever it is required. So that will help us to reduce rewriting the same code again and again, and it will help us to actually organize our code better. So in this video, we are going to take a look at HTTP module and a service which will use HTTP module to make calls in our Angular application and retrieve data from backend service. So first of all, we will go ahead and remove two files, storage file and this service file. Right click and delete them. We don't really need them. Now I'm going to go to app module, and here we are probably importing this storage service. So we need to remove this bit. Let's remove this, and we also remove this in the providers way. Save the file, and we should have our application up and running. So it says Angular12 module storage service. So basically, another thing that I'm going to talk about here, when you remove any file and your server is running, it is actually not going to update your application. So you have to restart your server. I'll press Ctrl C and then rerun nserv the open command, which will recompile our application without that service. So that would not be cached. So running the server, we still have that error, and the reason for that is app component importing the storage service. So I'm just going to remove that import, and now we should have our application up and running. Now you could go and create a file and then write all that code to create that as service, but don't do that. Okay, take a help from Angular CLI. So I'm going to go to next console, and I'm going to start typing ngg service, and we are going to type http, enter, and that will create us this http service. And you can see here we got this http service. We also got this spec file. Back to the service file. Now here we are creating a class. It has a constructor function in it. That's just the plain TypeScript stuff. And then we are importing this injectable decorator from Angular core package. This Angular core package has a lot of things. It's got all the core features. So most of the things that you will be importing from Angular will come from this Angular core package. Now, to be able to do HTTP calls, you could either use your plain JavaScript, or you could use the HTTP module, which is provided by Angular. And I would say you should be using HTTP module, which makes it easy for error handling, and also it will help you to make HTTP calls. We'll cover all the security issues. So we are going to use HTTP module. So HTTP module comes with HTTP client service, which is used to create GET request or POST request, update and delete request. So first of all, I am going to go to app module, and within our imports array, I'm going to use HTTP. I'll type module. It's not giving me suggestion. So what I'll do, I'll go to documentation and show you where you can find more information about HTTP module. So here's our documentation. I would like to go to this developer guide, and here we have this HTTP client. So communicating with the backend service using HTTP. This is the information that you need to read. Most of the things we will cover, but you will have to go to this documentation to advance your knowledge. But after watching this section of this video, you should be able to make API calls and then deal with the errors as well. So first of all, we need to this HTTP client module. So I didn't know the exact name, so it's good what we know now. So we'll go to HTTP client module. Still not giving me a suggestion, and I don't want to, spend time and then making sure that imports are good. So I will just copy that line and then paste it here. And now I should be able to use HTTP client module, add a comma. Once you add the client module, we go to HTTP service. And here I would like to import HTTP client. So I'm not going to import that, but I'm going to use the constructor function to import that for me with the suggestion, with the auto import. So I'll type private, which is going to be a variable, which just name it HTTP colon and HTTP client. Enter. Now it is importing the HTTP client from Angular common / HTTP package. Now what is happening here? This is where dependency injection comes into play in Angular. To be able to use any other service, you need to inject that into your constructor function for that particular class. For example, if I want to use this HTTP service into app component, I will have to import that into the constructor of this. So here we can see we don't have a constructor function. So right after my date, I'm going to type constructor function and then leave that here. Now, if you don't define a constructor function, TypeScript will automatically create that for you at the compile time. So either you create it, you don't create it, it is going to be there. So now let's go to HTTP service first. And to be able to do a HTTP calls, we can go to and create a function which will help us to create a GET request. So I'll use this GET request function. And I am going to use this .http dot, and now you'll see it is giving me some options to choose from, like get request, post, put, patch request. So I'll use the get request, and then I will use this URL, and then after URL there's going to be the handler for that, and then I'm going to just log dot response. All right, let's add a variable response. All right. Let's save this file. Now here we got some issues. So if I hover, it says no overloading to call the last overload save. So basically this is going to be an error because this is not the way you use this HTTP client service. So the way you use it, so if I go to this bit, okay, you're gonna use dot subscribe. And then here you're gonna have a response. Okay, I think I made that mistake just to show you what is this. So this is basically RxJS. We are using RxJS library under the hood, so we need to use this subscribe because this get function is going to return observable, which we will have to handle in the subscription. So the way you do that now with .subscribe function. So we do console.log and then response. Okay. Now this is going to take a URL, which is going to be a type of string, and we are going to return a JSON object. You can say observable, and we're going to specify the type of this. We just say any. Okay, now we can do like return. Now, again, right now we don't really need to do that. That's just the plain TypeScript. So I'm just going to just say void. All right, don't return anything. Here, instead of this single quotes, we'll use this URL. So that's a function which will help us to create a GET request. Now this is going to be a reusable service, so that's why I don't want to import into component directly. So that's why we keep that as provided in root, so it will be available for us. Now let's go to app component, and the way we use our HTTP service now is by putting that into the constructor function. I'll just say HTTP service, and we type HTTP service file, and now you have all the methods and properties available within app component from this service. So let's go to this handle event. Let me just format my code properly. And within this handle function, we are going to make an API call. So I'll just say this.http service dot, and then we have this function get request, and then we are going to pass the URL. And I'm going to use this fake API. So here we have this JSON placeholder, which is like a JSON API open to use. I will just grab this URL and then just going to paste that here. And just add a comma there. Now let's go and click on this button. So let's refresh the page, and I'm going to make click, and that should return this data. If you look at the network tab, here we are making this API call to this URL. Okay, that will return the data for us. So as you can see here, that's the header for that. And if I go to, I'm actually using Safari as a developer, but I don't really use it much, but let's work with this for now. So here's a request. So if I click again, it is going to make another API call, and the data is coming back. And click again, we got the GET request going. Take you to HTTP client documentation. So if we go to Angular documentation, and you got to go to developer guide and go to HTTP client. Click on that, and this will give you all the information about HTTP client module. So HTTP client module is going to export HTTP client service that we used in our code. And HTTP client service will have some functions like get, post, update, delete, and we've seen that. So I would like you to go ahead and then read this documentation, and you will be a master of making HTTP requests. But what we did in this section of the course is we created a separate service, we imported HTTP client module, and we used HTTP client from HTTP client module and used the get method of it, injected in our own custom HTTP service, and then we used that get request from our own service. So now you understand how to inject services into your components and how to make them available globally in your application. So I want you to look at this. There's a very good section here, handling request errors. So basically, usually this code is good enough for handling error. So it's going to accept the error, which is going to be the type of HTTP error response. And then here something is like a check. If it's saying stub error event, then it will just throw an error. So take a look at this. We will touch base to this documentation in a bit, but let's go back to our code. Now, just overall summary, we have this HTTP client, which we are using from this package. It's provided by Angular. We have nothing to do with it, and that gives us this get method, and then we are putting that into our own function and then returning from there. Now I'm going to make this service reusable now, and I would like to change some code here. First of all, let's not subscribe here. Okay, let's just use this as it is, and I'm going to return this get request. So let's return observable, and we are going to just return any for now. Okay, then we are going to create another function, which is a post request. We'll just say URL, that would be a string, and then we also need options, and we type HTTP post params. Okay, and that will return observable as well. And for now, we are going to just return any, and this will return this dot http dot post, and that will take a URL first and then options. We also going to use delete to actually use the update first. And this should have a URL, which will be type of string, and then it is going to have options. Okay. Well, that's actually not HTTP param, but we'll just leave that. That's actually HTTP headers. And we're gonna have to change that HTTP headers as well. It also required a data, which can be a type of any for now. So after we specified the data, which is going to be act as a body for a post request, we need to actually make options optional, first of all, and then that would take an object. So we'll just change that to any. But for the options, you can either have HTTP headers, or you can have like undefined, or there are other types that are available as well. So if you look at the post request, and here's a suggestion that is given by VS Code. So if you look at body, which is type any, and then options, which can have this object where we have headers, observers, params. All of them are optional and they have their own types as well. So options, basically HTTP options that you usually would use with JavaScript, those can go here as well, such as headers for your, or params for your request. So what I'll do, I'll just leave that as any for now. So we'll just use data and then we use option. Okay, now in this case we shouldn't be having any error, but we're just missing the comma here. There you go. Now similarly, I'm going to copy this bit and then paste it in our update function. All right, and that will return us this http dot put request, and then we will have a URL, data, and then options. Okay, and those are optional. I'm going to save this file. Now, just to talk a little bit about this file. So this can be our reusable service to make all sort of API calls in our Angular application, like GET requests, POST requests, or update requests. So let's go back to documentation. If you look at here, it will tell you how to use these requests and what are the options that you can push into it. So here you see it is telling us an optional object can have a headers. This is your general HTTP headers. Observer, we have params, request progress, and response time, and if there are any credentials. So I would like you to read about it, because if I start explaining every single bit from this is going to be a 5-hour video just on HTTP module. So the goal for this video is to show you the basics and also show you where you can learn more, so you will never have to watch any other video about Angular. Now, a couple of things I would like to talk about, so that basically required for you to start using this HTTP module. I'm going to go to handling errors. Now, you can handle errors by using a pipe on observable. So we are going to just copy this bit, and I'm going to create that as a function. And I will just use this as HTTP handle error function, and this is basically not imported. So what we'll do is use a quick fix, and I will click on this button, and that will import that for us from this common/HTTP package. We're going to use this handle error function is by using a pipe function from RxJS library. So this get function will return an observable which we can pipe to. So I'm going to remove this semicolon and start by typing dot pipe, and I'm going to call the function called catch error and pass in this dot handle error function. Okay, so this is going to give us an error because VS Code probably cannot auto import for me. So I'll go here and I will make this a copy. Let's remove throw error and observable, and we're going to type catch error, and this is going to come from this package /operators. Now there's no error, so that's good. I will make a space here and I will just copy this on pretty much all the functions that we have created. And now we are able to catch errors, and you can do your logic depending on the type of error you're getting in this function now. Now, the way we're going to use this HTTP service now is by going to app component. And now you can see it is calling this get request function on this URL. Let's save the file and let's go and click. I'll click on it. It is not going to make an API call. Why is that? Well, because we have not subscribed to it. Now, before initially we were subscribing that into HTTP service. Now this has become like a reusable service now. You can use it in multiple components, and depending on that component you use, you will be able to subscribe to that component. So now I'm going to remove this semicolon and we'll type dot subscribe, and then we are going to use the response object, and then we're going to just do a console log. We just say response. Now also we can use dot And if you are going to remove once you finish with this, you should be able to unsubscribe to that as well. But we're not going to do that here. That's a little bit more advanced topic. So you can also, when you subscribe, you make sure you unsubscribe to Observable as well. Let's save this, and we are going to click on this click me button, and now it's making API call, and you will see the data coming in. And we're going to do something like this. I'm going to use this dot JSON value equal to response. Save the file. Let's click, and you will see the value that we're getting from that request. So it is not going to change. It is the same value that we're getting. So now you can see you subscribe to it, you got the data, and this is where we have covered the basics of services and dependency injection. We also learned about how do we create API calls in Angular. Now it's time for us to look at how do we go and explore more and advance our knowledge using Angular documentation. Now, if I take you to this HTTP client, I've already talked about, you have to read this. It will tell you making a post request, making a delete request. So basically, the basic concept you already know, but watching this video, you see here, this is the way they're piping and catching the error. But it will also learn more details, APIs for HTTP client. I'll take you to this API reference. So the way you get to this page is by going to API reference, and here you search for HTTP client and click on it, and this is like a plain API reference that you can use to find out what's available to you in HTTP client. There are methods available for this, like these ones. We used get, we used post, put. So click on that, and that'll tell you what it does. Click on show all. That'll give you this sample code as well, and then the params that you can pass in. So there's a lot of knowledge. I want you to look at this HTTP client module if you want to advance your knowledge about HTTP. We'll go back to the documentation here. This is just a guide. Then also, we are going to look at some RxJS stuff later in the video. But let's go back and talk a little bit more about multiple components in your applications. We're going to learn how do we create different components and then use those components into our main component. I would like to point out this. So you see, this is a file of ScreenFlow, which is the file for this video, which is already 37.94 gigabyte. And the reason for that, because I am using DSLR to record myself, it will take a lot of time to render this video. That's why from this point onwards, I'm just going to hide myself and just show you my computer screen. We are going to create a new component. We are going to call that a user component, and then we will use that component into our app component. So let's go to terminal. I'm going to use ngg component, and we're going to name it user. Enter, and you will see we will have some more files within that folder, and here our new component is ready for us to use. And it also had this update. So you notice here it updated this app module as well. So you could use that flag where it says do not import. So if you didn't want to import. So right now, if I go to app module, you will see this user component is automatically imported for us. The files. So we got these 4 files: user component.html, Sass file, spec file, and TypeScript file. I'm going to take you to user component, and it's marked with component decorator, the selector for this app-user, template URL, and then style URL. It's automatically ready to go for use into different component. Now, new thing that we can see here, it says implement on init. So this basically will make sure it will run the code when this component get initialized. So I'm going to take you to user component HTML, and it says user works right here. Now, how do we use this into our app component? We use that by using this selector. So I'm going to open that user component.typescript file, and here's a selector for that. Now, if I go to app component and then start typing here app-user and close that tag, save it, if I take a look at this, here it says user works. So right now we can see the data from user component is getting rendered here as well. Well, I wouldn't call it data, but this is the view that is available here now. User component.html, and here we like to say h1 use this in app component. Save the file, and you will see this, use this in app component. So when automatically it renders this app-user component by using its select. Now in Angular, we have a way to interact with the child component. So in this case, this is a child component of app component because this is going to get rendered after the app component, and when the compiler sees this, it is going to render this component. Now let's go to user component, and we go to user component.typescript file. We need to create an object. So we'll name it user equal to, and then we have a property for that, which is going to be empty for now. Age, let's say empty for now. ID, which for now we just leave that as 0. I'm going to change the name property to, let's say John, let's say age 32. Save the file. Now we go to user component.html, and I'm going to use some h1s, and I'm going to say user.name. Let's make a copy of it, and we just target user.age, and we are going to target user.id. Save the file. If you go here, you see it is not reading the data because we're not using interpolation, so we need to use double curly braces. Okay, so right now you can see we got John, 32, and 0. So that means we are reading properties from user component. And one of the common use case in Angular is to actually get the properties from a parent component. So right now this is statically written here, John, 32, and 0. But how about we want to grab this user from the outside world? So first of all, let's go and create an interface. So we'll just say interface, we'll just say user interface, and the user interface should have a name property, which type is string, should have age property, should be a type of string, and ID, which should be a type of number. All right, now we are going to use a decorator called input. So I'm going to delete this object, and I'm going to say input, okay, which is going to be imported from Angular core package, and we just say user, and we define this type as user interface, and we just leave that there. Now input is imported. If you look at here, that's been imported, okay, from Angular core package. Now here it says property user has no initializer. Get the data from outside, so that would be app component. So just to fix this TypeScript error, we can say this dot user equal to, let's say, empty object, and we can say as user interface. And that will hack fix it for now. If we look at the code, here we have no data coming in, but how do we pass in a data to user component now from app component? Let's take a look at that next. We go to app component, and here I'm going to comment this code. Now, because this user component has this input decorator here, it is expecting this user object, which is going to have this interface. So let's go to app component, and I'm going to, first of all, create a user object. So instead of this JSON, we are going to create user equal to, I'll say name, let's say John, age, let's say 32, let's say ID would be, let's just say 0. All right, and let's remove these properties. Let's save the file. Now we have this JSON value. This is going to cause an error, so I'll just remove that, and I'll just say console.log hello. All right, let's take a look at our application now. We don't have anything. So we're not passing this user object to our user component. So the way we do that, we go to app component, and here, let me zoom in a bit. So here we're going to start with the square brackets, and we're going to target the property inside the user component. That would be user, and we can set that equal to user. All right, this can be confusing, but let's save the file and let's take a look. Now we can see this is going to render John32 0 from this user component, but data is getting passed through this app component. So the way we do that, let's say we change the property to user object. We go to app component, and here I'm going to say user object. Now it probably makes sense now. So what's happening here is this is the property that is going to be targeted in this app-user component, which is this user component, right? Now we're targeting this, we're telling Angular, hey, go ahead, look for this property inside the user component, and then pass in the object which was in your parent component, which is in this case is app component, and that's the data that's getting passed. Save the file. Now let's refresh the page. It's again causing an issue. It says user objects not found because we have not saved this file. Let's save this file. Let's go refresh the page, and you'll see that John32 0 is getting printed. Now, another use case is actually listening the event from a child component. So I am going to go to user component, and here we're going to use another decorator. So we are going to use this output, and we are going to say user event, and that would be type of event emitter. Okay, so here we have this static from event emitter from node events, which is wrong. So I'm going to have to remove this line, and I want to make sure this output is used from Angular core. So I will use this event emitter, and that's going to come in from Angular core package. So you see this event emitter from Angular core package. That's what we need. The file, you can see we have an error in the console. So we have to actually use a type that is going to be returned. So the data type. So here we need to change the colon to equal to, and we are going to create new event emitter. And I'm going to specify user interface, and this is going to get done. Now you could also do this. So if I just delete this bit, and we can specify the type of this, which is going to be event emitter. I want to make sure this is coming from Angular core package, and in the constructor, we can say this dot user event equal to new event emitter, and the type would be user interface, and we call this like that. An error in the console, so that's basically a generic type error. The way we fix it is by specifying the type as well. So here, if you're using this user interface as a type, then you have to specify when you're creating a user event. Now I'm going to go and create a function here. So I'll just say send user event. All right, and I am going to just say it is not going to return anything, which is set type as wide. And here we say this dot user event, and we call the function on it called emit. And then we are going to simply send back this dot user. That's not user event, but user. Let's save this file, and we won't see any error. Now, if I go here, I can see the data going into user component, but how do I listen to this event? So we go to app component, and this is where we are using our app-user, right? So this way you will pass the data in, but you can also listen for it. So if I just use parentheses, I'm going to look for user event. So here it's giving a suggestion as well. So if there is a user event, then we are going to call a function. So a function would be, let's say, handle event. Let's save this file. We take a look at our handle event function again. I'm going to delete this bit. Okay. and then I'm going to look for a data. So that would be event. Next, we are going to do console.log, and we use the event dot, let's say, log the event. We'll go to app component, and here we need to use $event object. Save this file and save this file, and now we should be able to receive event from user component. Here we have an error that says event type is any. So that would be just say any. Okay, we need to just keep that type any for now. Now, if I go here, where do I click to actually get the data? So let's modify a few things. We are going to use 3 input fields. So let's delete this. We don't really need these anymore. Let's remove all of this. Okay, I'm gonna start by using input, and we are going to bind this with user object dot name. I'm going to make a duplicate of it, and here it's going to be age. Next one is going to be ID. To our app, you can see here we are doing two-way binding. If I change the value to 4, now because we're doing a two-way binding, it is going to update this bit as well. Now, you see, if we go to app component, it is not actually rendering that any longer. So that object is basically coming from this user component. So this is where it's going to render this value. And user component is always listening for the value from app component, because we are passing this user object to this user input decorator, which is going to constantly listen for this value. So it is like referencing to the parent component data by using input decorator. To user component.typescript file, and here we're calling this send user event. All right, so we're gonna trigger that. So we are going to create a button. Let's start with the button tag, and I'm going to use a click event equal to, it says send user event, and we're going to say send user event. Let's save this file, and now this function will emit this .user object using this event emitter, and then we are handling that in our app component by using this user event property of this app user component, and we're passing the function that is going to handle that, and this event object going to have that event. So let's save this. Let's go to application. Now we have this button here. Now this handle event is just going to log the event in the console. So let's go to console, and I'm going to click on send user event, and you will see here the data that is coming from our event, John, age, and 0. Now I'm going to remove, let's say, this bit for now. Let's save this. Now, as you can see, we don't know what is the current state of the data in there. So I'm just going to change that to, let's say, this gibberish, change this to this, then 6 and send. And you will see the data that we're getting from that user component is exactly what we have typed here. You're wondering, what is the use case for this? Well, the use case is that this user component will be able to inject into any other parent component. Like, let's say you have a very fancy CSS going on for this particular user. Now, if you want to use this object separately into different components, then you will have to rewrite that CSS. But if you have that in one place where you will have here, then it basically goes along wherever you use this user component, and that's going to be really beneficial to make a reusable code and modularize your code. Get the documentation for input and output decorators. So in documentation, you need to click on understanding Angular, then you go to templates, and here we have input and output. The title for this page is sharing data between child and parent directives and components. Seen most of input and output, the decorators and their use case, but I want to point out some of the diagrams here on this page. So we have this diagram which is telling you you can pass data from parent to child component. Here's a code sample for that. And I would like to point out to this diagram. So here is a selector, a child selector. Then we have this target input property from a child. Now, in our case, this is the user property from our user component. That's our child component, right? We have this current item, which is the property from a parent. So we're passing in this user object, which is our parent component, and that's app component.html. Then this is going to use this input decorator from a child, and it's going to set that value from our parent source. If we go down here, we have a diagram from output. So you can output data or events from child to parent using output decorator. Here's a sample for that, how you create an event emitter. Then here's a use case for that, not use case, but a sample code. Then we go down a bit, and I would like to show you this diagram. So this diagram is telling us a lot of things, and I'm going to reference that to our code. So here we have this selector. Then we have this input decorator from a child. Then we have this property from a source. Then here is a syntax for listening to the event. So it says delete a request. And a delete request is coming from our event from a child. And we create that event name from event emitter. And then here's a function which is in our source. And here they name it cross of item, and they're using this event object, right? So similarly, we are doing here. We got this child selector. Then we have this input decorator, which is passing this user object data. Then we're listening for this user event. And then we are going to handle event by using this handle event function and passing this event object. Now, if I go to this user event, and if I rename this to user custom event, let's save this. And we need to change here as well, custom, and change this to custom as well. Let's save this file. Now, if I go to application, I'll click here, and you'll see it is not going to work because we're not listening for this event anymore. If you go to app component, here you are going to listen for user event, which does not exist in user component. So user component has this user custom event that we need to listen for now. So I will copy this, and we go back to app component, and we're going to change this to user custom event. We'll save this. Now, if I click here, you will see the event in a log. So you need to make sure this name is exactly the name of your output decorator variable. Now, in the documentation, it is not something that we haven't covered. We covered everything, but here's a reference for that. Now, from this template section, we pretty much covered everything. We talked about text interpolation, pipes, template statements, property binding, attributes, class styles. We also looked at event and two-way binding, template reference variable, which we are going to cover when we talk about forms in Angular. We are going to cover directives in Angular. There are two types of directives, structure directives and attribute directives. Let's take a look at what we can do with structure and attribute directives. We have two types of directives. We have attribute directives, and we also have structure directives. First, let's take a look at attribute directives. Now, I'm going to read this out. First, let me show you how you can get to this page. If you go to Understand Angular, then you go to Directives, and then click on Built-in Directives. Now here we have three directives, and it says here, many ng modules such as router module and form modules define their own directives, and the most common directives are these three directives. This directive we've already seen, which adds the two-way data binding to an HTML form element. We also have these two directives, ng class and ng style. So let's take a look at ng class. So what it does, depending on the condition, it will add or remove CSS classes to our HTML element. Let's take a look at the syntax for ng class attribute directive. Here is a usage. So we start with the ng class in square brackets. We define a condition here with ternary operator. So if is special returns true, then the class will be applied. Otherwise, no class will be applied to that div. Let's take a look at demo. So here in the user component, I am going to start with the div tag, and I'm going to type attribute directive. And then inside the div tag, I'm going to start with this ng class equal to condition, which is going to be in double quotes. First of all, let's just say true, question mark, and then we are going to specify single quote, colon, single quote, single quote. So the first single quote will have the class name, which we have not created yet. So let's go to user component.sass file, because all the style goes into Sass files for that particular component. I'm going to start a class by a dot, and I'm going to say colored. We'll just use the color style, and I'm going to use this color as this greenish color. Let's save this file, and we're going to go and define that colored class. Now this is true now, and this should have this color. So there you go. So we get attribute directive text has this color now. If I change this to false, we don't have a color any longer for attribute directive. So you see, depending on the condition, you have that class applied. Now, how do we read this value from our TypeScript file? We can do that by going here, and I'm going to say is colored. We say boolean, and I am going to, now it's giving me an error. It says user is colored boolean has no initializer. So that's fine. We will initialize this right inside our constructor function. This dot is colored set to true. Save, and we're going to go back to HTML file, and instead of false, we're going to say is colored. Save. Let's take a look at the color. Yes, we're getting the color applied. Now if I go ahead and change the property value from true to false, save, and we should not see a color anymore. So let's go back to the code. Now here, I'm going to go to HTML file, and you see this is colored. Let's read this from our parent component. So I'm going to go to app component.ts file, and I'm going to say is colored true. Okay, that's what we're going to pass in, and I'm going to go into user, and here we need to update the interface. So is colored, and that would be a boolean type. So I'm going to make sure that my spelling are correct. So let's undo and add an E here. Let's copy this, go back to app component.typescript file and update that as well. Now we go up to user component, and here I would like to set that as this dot user dot is colored. Now sometimes this can be undefined, so that will throw an error. So the way we handle the error, we will basically add this ternary operator. If this is true, then say true, otherwise have that as false. So we're basically typing a code which is safe. It will never throw an error. I'll save this file, and we go here. Now we don't see any color. That's because this is coming as undefined, so that's why it's set to false. If I go to app component, and here I'm going to say false. Actually, we had this, but we didn't save this file. Now it's no color, but I'm going to change this to true, save, and now we should see a color there. We're not seeing the color, so what's happening? There's another catch here. That's what I wanted to show you. Now, we are initializing this in the constructor file. So this place is actually wrong. So what I'll do, I'll just, to show you, I'm going to do console.log, and I would like to say this dot is color. Let's log this. Now when our components gets initialized, you'll see this coming as false. So let's take a look at the app component is colored. That's fine. That is going to send into this user component. But what's happening here? Why it is not setting as true. Now if I log this user.isColored, now let's save it. Let's take a look at that. Now you can see it is coming as undefined, but it's not throwing an error. So let's say if I don't use this ternary operator and I just say this is colored, now when I look at the page, it is coming as undefined, and that's why there will be a chance that your code will have problems in the future. So make sure you do a null and undefined check all the time. Now what's going on here? So this .user.isColored, is this right? So I'll save this. We go here, we make sure it's the right spelling, and we save this file as well. We'll take a look at HTML file. Yes, we're pushing the user object, and we have this handle event. So let's probably click here. Once I click on that, you will see the value is actually isColored set to true, but this is not going to be used. We check the user, and we have to actually make sure that isColored is properly spelled. Well, still not working. What's going on here? Any guess? Well, the guess is because this is not ready, the view is not ready when this component gets initialized. That's why it is not going to get applied. So for that, we are going to use this ng-on-init lifecycle hook for component. So I'm going to cut this line here, and I'm going to paste that line in ng-on-init function. Now here we're getting this isColored boolean, so property going to has no initializer. So that's fine. We are going to just make this as false on the top. Now if this comes and makes this true, then it will be true, otherwise we won't have any issues. Let's go take a look at our application, and now you can see it is getting applied. So the color is green. So what's happening here is if I move this line into this one, then it's coming as undefined. The value is true, but the class didn't get applied. The reason why, on the initialize time, the CS is not ready, but this constructor get initialized with this color undefined. So that's why that kind of thing will go into ng-on-init. I'm going to take you to the documentation, and inside a new tab, I would like to point out this component lifecycle documentation, which we will look at once we cover our attributes, attribute directives and structure directives. So now you got the idea what's happening here. ng-on-init is basically gets called when this component is initialized. So when this is initialized, that means it will have the HTML and CSS ready to be applied, and that's when this gets true because we have the right value from this input decorator at that stage. Go to documentation, and we're gonna go look at a structural at directives. So I'm gonna go down, and here we're gonna skip this because this is very simple. You gotta read the documentation and you will understand what is the attribute directive, like this one, ng class. I'll point you to another document here which will tell you how to create your own custom attributes. Now we already looked at this ng module. We are going to go down, and here is the built-in structural directives. According to documentation, it says structure directives are responsible for HTML layout. They shape or reshape the DOM structure by adding, removing, and manipulating host elements which they are attached to. There are three built-in directives. We are going to look at this ngIf and ngFor, and I'll point you to the documentation for ngSwitch. It's the same way we use these two directives. So let's go and take a look at this adding or removing elements with ngIf. This is going to be your best friend when you're going to build Angular application. ngIf and ngFor, that is used a lot. So here's the syntax for that. You simply start with ngIf followed by the steric symbol, and then you specify the expression in your double quotes. So I'm gonna go here, and in the app component, I would only like to show this app user if my property on the app component says yes, show it. So I'm going to create a property is user visible, or maybe we can say show user. We say boolean, that's its type. By default we can say it's false because we have to initialize it. I'll save this file, and in app component I will create ng container. Now this is an empty container. Usually it has no effect on your DOM. So you could actually use div, but div will have some effect in your DOM. That's why we have this ng container, which is like an empty container in Angular, and you should use this over plain div if you just want to hide or remove or manipulate any DOM with ng if. So I will move this one inside ng container, and right now if I save this file, I'll go to the app, and you can see we are still seeing this attribute directive, send user event, and then this form. So if I am going to inspect this, let's click on this button, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to inspect this attribute directive. So if you look at this, we have this div directly in our app component. We are input, 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 and then app user directly. So there is no ng container available. But if I use this as, let's say, div, and I change this to div as well, save the file. Now we are going to inspect this, and you can see we do have a div, and then we have app user. So this element is just sitting there doing nothing. That's why I would use ng container if I don't want to show any element, and that's only for a logic purpose. So that's why Angular provides this ng container. So type ng container. Let's do ng container. Now here I'm going to start with structure directive ng if equal to, I'm going to say show user. Now it is not going to show a suggestion because we need to add this star symbol there, and then if I remove this and say show, it's not giving me a suggestion. So let's take a look at the property. So here's we have show user. I'll make sure I save this file, and here I'm going to actually remove this, and we're going to use ng if. It's not giving me any suggestion. So I'm going to go to the documentation and just make sure that I'm writing it properly. So I is capital. So what we'll do, we'll use the static ng if. That's where we get the suggestion. And then I'm going to say show user. Now TypeScript is working and VS Code is giving us the suggestion. I will save the file. Let's take a look at the application, and now you'll see directive attribute, and that button is gone because this is getting implemented and it says it returns false at this stage. That's why this component does not render in the DOM. Now if we inspect the application, and I'm gonna go into the app root, and here you can see we got this input, 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 but we don't have that ng container. So if I make this property as true, save the file, make sure to save this file as well. Now we do have directives, attribute directives actually. I'm gonna inspect this bit, and here you see still no ng container. So that's the difference between using a plain div. A lot of junior developers, they don't realize the effect of using their simple div into the DOM. Because if you want to have a reference to this particular thing into your component with using view child decorator, then you will have to go into a nested element, which will be this app user. So that adds the layer at another trouble which is not required. So that's a attribute where you can do a logic and say, yep, if it's going to render or not. Very common use case in Angular application or any other framework like React or Vue is you have to loop through the values and then render them into the DOM. That's where the iteration comes into play in these frameworks. So in Angular, we have this structure attribute called ng4, and I'm going to read this. So you can define ng4 directly to represent a list of items. Defines a block of HTML that determines how Angle renders a single item. To get items in an array, whether it's an object or array of objects, you can use ng4 to iterate over them and render them by each item in items. So here's the syntax for that, pretty similar as we have ngIf. Now, we need the data to be able to render in our DOM. So that's why I'm going to use this fake API. And here we have this /post. This is going to return us 100 posts. So we're going to use this. Let's go back to our code. And we have this HTTP service. I'm going to use that. I'm going to create a function first. So let's say get posts. And this is going to give us posts. We can create an interface like we have this user ID, title, and body if you want to. But for now, we'll just leave that as any. So I'm going to say it returns any. We're going to use this .http service.getRequest, and we're going to pass in this URL. Let's copy this URL, and we're going to paste that. Then after this, we're going to use .subscribe, and we're going to check for response. And I'm going to set a variable here. I'll say post type any equal to empty array. Okay. Then once we get the post, which is going to be an array of these objects, we will set these posts to the post local variable. So we can say this .post will change the name to post. That makes more sense. Equal to response. A way to trigger this get post method. So I am going to implement on init. Okay, and that requires a method to be placed in our component TypeScript file, which would be ng on init. And once that gets initialized, I'm just going to say this .get post. Okay. So if I go to application, I'll refresh the page. Here we have this post request now, and here we got all the data coming through. Now I'm going to go to app component.html file. We are going to start with UL, and we're going to use li. And in li, I would like to, first of all, in the UL, we're going to create multiple unordered list. So use star symbol ng4, and I'm going to set that equal to, let's say, let item of posts. All right. Now it is going to get each item post, and we can grab that object from this post array. So I'm going to start with interpolation, item.user ID. We're going to make a copy of this, and we can also render this title, and I'm going to render a body. I'm going to save this file. We go to the page, and now you can see when we get the data, it is going to iterate over that post data and then create a list for each post. So there's about 100 of them. And if you look at the network tab, click here, go to network tab, and we got about 100 posts here. So let's go all the way down, and we're going to take a look at what is the ID, user ID for the last post. So that's 10. So let's go all the way down. We have this as 10. Instead of rendering this user ID, we're going to enter just an ID. Let me make sure that's correct. So let's save, refresh the page, and now we got the ID getting rendered. We go all the way down, and we should see 100. So now you can see what we had to do to actually get the data and then render in a DOM with ng4. How easy is that? Now, all of this can be simplified with a pipe called async pipe. I'm going to remove this function, but before that, I'm just going to copy this line. And I'm going to simply paste that here. Okay, and let's get rid of this function completely. And I'm just going to comment this line out as well. Now, if I save the file and I refresh, it is not rendering the data. And the reason for that is because this is observable and we have not subscribed to it. So let's say if I do dot subscribe, let's see what happens. Still no data, but it did make a call and it did got the data. But why it's not rendering? It's because when this component get initialized, this post object is not ready for a render. So the way we can do that is by using async pipe. We go to HTML and here we are going to use this pipe symbol and I'm going to simply type async. Save the file and guess what? We got the data back. Now, usually when you use observables, you have to subscribe to them and you also have to unsubscribe to them to reduce the memory leak, actually eliminate the memory leak in your application. Memory leaking is another concept and this is basically out of the scope of this video. So I would prefer to use async pipe because it will automatically deal with subscribing and unsubscribing when this component gets destroyed from our DOM. We go to documentation and take a look at this async pipe now. So here's the API list. I'm going to click on type and I'm going to filter out by pipe. And here we have this async pipe. I'll click on that and here is the description for that. It says unwraps a value from asynchronous primitive. So either it's an observable or a promise. It says subscribables, which means observable that it has to subscribe to. This is purely RxJS. You have to know that to be able to understand this. Here's a description. You want to read about it, you can read it. And here is observable that is creating. So because this HTTP client get method automatically returns observable, that is why that async pipe is just working just by specifying it. All right, so let's go back to the code. We looked at this ng-for, which is something that you're going to be using a lot in your Angular career. A very common case in loops where you have to check the index of an item within a loop. You can do that by using this syntax. So I'm going to add a semicolon here, and I'm going to say let I equal to index. And because we're using async pipe, the syntax is a little bit different here. But if I remove this async pipe, you will see that we don't have that error any longer. I'm going to go and grab that post request. So let's say I will just remove this and add async pipe, save the file, and we can see we get the data. I'm going to copy some objects from here. Okay, I think that one is fine. Copy this. And we're going to go to app component. And instead of this HTTP call, I'll just use post any equal to, and we use this object. And then I'm going to add a square bracket there. I'll save the file. And now we're not loading any data from basically from HTTP module. So if I go and refresh the page, it is not going to load because async pipe is there. So I'm just gonna remove that. And now we get the data. Now to be able to check the index for each item, I can use this syntax let I equal to index. And I'm going to render the index, which is stored in I variable instead of this user ID or ID. Let's save the file, and now you can see we are rendering the index. So like main JavaScript loops starts from 0, and it is starting from 0 as well in let I is equal to index syntax. Okay, now how about you want to use this let index with async pipe? You can also do that. So let's go and undo. First of all, let's remove this static data, and I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to uncomment this line. save the file. Now we are going to use async pipe. The way we're going to do that, we're going to wrap this post into parentheses and use async pipe. Now we are going to use semicolon and say let I equal to index. I'll save the file. Now we look at the data is getting loaded and we're getting the index of each item as well within this post. The most important part of ngFor, but that's not it. ngFor has some more options that you want to have a look in documentation, and I want to show you now what's available to you in the documentation. So if you look at this ngFor, we use this let index, so it says getting index for ngFor, and we're still in building directives page from documentation. We also have this tracking items with ngFor by track by. So the syntax for that is simply as let index, but here you have a different syntax. So I would like you to try this out and read this, and you will know what to do here. If we go down here, we have some more information about ngFor. I would like to take you to the API reference for ngFor. Let's click on this, and that's coming from Angular Common Package. And it says a structured directive that renders HTML templates each item in a collection. So here we got some properties. We have a description. We got this index as I. So you see there's another syntax available to check the index. So that's what you get to know in the documentation. We have it tracked by, and you pass in that function instance there. Now if you go local variable, take a look at this bit here. Okay, static methods, and I would like you to read this information. This is very, very important to master some of the API that are available in Angular. So next topic we are going to cover is going to be routing, which is very common in pretty much all the frameworks as well. And without routing, you cannot build a complex or big application. Now, again, the Angular is a single page application builder, but we also have routing in that. And for documentation, we are going to go to developer guides and routing and navigation. Now, I would like you to read through this documentation once you finish this video or finish the part of the routing. We're going to go through very common options. That would be enough for you to build an application, but there are in detail information available here that I think you should go through. But we're gonna quickly go through and understand how the routing and lazy loading works in Angular, and that will help you to build very, very large and complex application. And then it will help you to modularize your code, because you're gonna jump from one module to the next module, and then from that module to the next module, depending on the functionality of your application. So let's go back to the code. And I'm going to create a new project because this project is, messy. We will have to clean this up, and that's not what I want to do. So in 1 second, I'm going to have a fresh project with only app component and app module. About navigation and routing in Angular. It is one of the core concepts that you need to learn and you need to master to be able to become Angular developer. Without routing, you cannot develop big applications. So we have this fresh project which we will use to implement the routing. But first, this video is getting larger and larger, and its size is in GBs. I've shown you already there's like 40 GB, but now it is almost 50 gigabyte. So I'm gonna just hide myself. Open a new terminal, and I'm going to use ngg command, and I'm going to generate some components. So I'll just create first component. We will use second component. We will use third, and we're going to create fourth component. Now we got 4 components. Now how do we navigate to these components? We've seen how do we render this within app component by using that selector, but we don't want to do that. We want to navigate to these components. So for that, we're going to go to app routing module. Let's zoom in a bit. Now here we have this routes array. But first, let's take a look at what we need to implement a routing. When you create a module, Angular asks you if you want to generate a routing for that or not. So you can manually say, for example, ngg module, and I'll say test module -- routing. This -- routing will automatically create this app routing module file, which will automatically be injected into specific module, which can be used to do the routing. So right now in our routes, there is no route. So we want to basically reference these components into these routes. Now what we importing? We are importing this router module. We are importing routes from this Angular router package. So that's a separate package for routing in Angular. To create two objects in this routes array, I'll start with path, and a path would be first, comma, and we're going to start with component. And then here you need to specify the name of the component. So in this case, that would be first component. Then we make a copy of this, and I'm going to change the path to second, and we're going to use this second component. Actually, we can make a copy of this, and we can implement this third and fourth. And let's change the name to third component and fourth component. I'm going to save this file, but let's add comma because it's an array. That's going to turn out. Now we got the routes set up. You see this first, second, and third, and that will basically help us to route to that particular component. But before we do that, we take a look at module. You want to make sure that you have this first, second, third, and fourth component in the declaration array. That's how Angular module, in this case it's app module, will know what we are trying to access. So we're trying to access these components by route. So we go to an application, I'll refresh. Right now, I think our server is not running because it's a fresh application I created. So I'll type ng serve -- no open. Let's wait for this to compile the project and run our server. Okay, I'm gonna go here, refresh, and you have this app component, which is basically created by default. So let's go and pretty much delete everything from here. Let's select and delete everything except this router outlet. Okay. Now I'm going to go to URL and I'm going to specify here -first. So we are accessing this route manually from a browser. Enter, and you will say it says first works. So it is routing to that component. If I go to type second, you see here we're accessing this second. Let me zoom into it here. So press enter. You'll see it says second works. That means we are in that component. So the reason why we can get to these is because we have specified the paths. So let's say /third, enter, and it says third works. Now let's say if I'm going to go to run module and I'm going to say third test, and I save this. Now the component says the third component, but it is actually not going to work by just third. There is no route available for that. If you look at the console, it says basically uncatch cannot match any route. So that route is not available. So what's available is if we type /third test, enter, and now it's going to go to that route. Now, the way we can do routing by clicking on a button, that's what we're going to look at next. I'm going to first of all remove this router outlet, save the file, And if I refresh now, let's take a look at the first component. Well, I cannot access it, but it's not throwing an error. It's not saying it's not available, but it's just not rendering. And that's because we don't have this router outlet. Outlet is a directive from a router library that is used like a component. It acts as a placeholder that marks the spot in template where the route should be displayed. So given the configuration above, when the browser for this application becomes /first, the router matches that URL to the route path /first and displays the first component as a sibling element to the router outlet that you have placed in your host component template. I'm going to go and create a new route. So first of all, let's go and create an anchor tag. And here we're going to use a router link equal to, and we can say /first. For routes, we are using this router link attribute, which will help us to route to that particular route. So we'll go to the application, and this is how our app looks like. I'm going to click on go to first, and you will see this bit will change. I'll click on go to second, this will change, and now it is rendering second component. If we go to third, it is rendering now third component. See, it is rendering the components right where we have this router outlet directive. To demonstrate that it is following this as a placeholder, we are going to create two divs. To save time, I'm going to go to W3 schools, and here's an example for two 50 by 50 divs. So we'll just copy this. I'm going to go and paste them here. Let's get rid of image because we don't have that image and I don't want to store that. Let's save. And now we have two sections, but we don't have that CSS ready yet. So we go to app component, and I would like to copy this CSS as well. Let's go down. Let's copy and let's paste it here. Let's save this file and let's see. All right, so we got two separate sections now. That is cool. So let's say if I move my, let's say we remove this too and remove this bit as well. Okay, and I'm gonna move the router outlet. Let's cut it and paste in right. Save. Now, as you can see here, it is rendering this third works in a second area. So if I go in and change it to first, now you see it is rendering here. Now, for some reason, it is not rendering this bit here. So we might want to try putting that into div. Let's take a look if that happens, because I didn't see the HTML and the CSS that coming from this W3 schools. Let's save it. Still not able to see that, so that's fine. It's probably overriding it, so we don't really care for now, but we will use this URL to actually go through. Now if I change this router outlet from here and put it here, now this will become a placeholder for all the routes. Let's refresh, and you might be noticing it is like a dark, you can't really see black and a black color. So if I go to CSS file somewhere here, I should have this 1 so I'm gonna change this to, let's say, white. Save. Now as you can see, it is rendering here. So now you understand that how this router outlet affects your DOM, and this is going to be the placeholder. So make sure that you have that to the right place where you want to render these routes. Talk about some other use cases for routing. So usually you would like to make sure that your route is properly handled. For example, if I go and try to go to, let's say, 5th, enter, it is going to throw an error. But we don't really want to show an error in the console. We want to tell the user that this page does not exist. So how do we do that? We're going to go to app routing module, and here I am going to create a wildcard for that. So we will use path, and we're gonna do instructs. Now if that happens, then I would like to go to first component. Let's save the file. Now if I go to, let's say, fifth, enter, it is going to go to the first component. And the reason for that is because it is not able to find any route which is matched to what we are trying to target. It is still saying fifth in the URL of the browser, but it is rendering this first component. Now if I change this to second component, it should go to second component now. Now in the URL, we're just gonna type some gibberish here, enter, and it is going to go to the second route. Now according to the documentation, here we have this, let's say, displaying a 404. Now here's an example that I've used. So path, double static component, and page not found. So right now we're just accessing first and second component, but you should be able to create a component which is acting as a 404. That means page not found, and that should be, you know, that should be the component that you should navigate to if there is no route that matches. Now setting up a wildcard, here's some information that we just used. So you got a path with double static and then the type for the component. Now we have some redirect. So here we have the redirect. For example, if there is no route that user defines, then which component it should render to. Now the way we do that is by going to creating another object, and we specify path. We just leave that empty because there is no route. Then we're going to use the redirect to, and we're going to redirect to /first. And that's going to be this component that is going to redirect to. Okay, if there is nothing here. Next, we are going to rather how to match this path. And we will have this path match property, and the value will be full. Let's save it. Now, if I go to URL, right now it's a gibberish. So let's remove everything and let's keep it empty. Enter. And that goes to first works. That's the first component. Now if I go and change this to, let's say, gibberish, it is going to go to second works because the wildcard is set to second component and redirect is set to /first. So it's going to match this route, and here in the routes we got this first set as first component. We've been routing within components with router outlet attribute. Now, how about a routing to a component using a TypeScript file? So I'll take you to app.component.ts file. We are going to create a constructor function, and within the constructor function, we are going to use private. We're going to say router, and we are going to import a router. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and then create some function. First of all, let's create a function. We'd say go to route, and here we are going to ask for a route which is going to be the type string. Let's not go anywhere. So now here we're going to use this router, and it has some functions. For example, navigate by URL or navigate, or we have also this config. Let's take a look at navigate by URL. Click on that, and here we need to specify URL in a string or URL tree, and we also have some extra options. Now let's just use this route. Okay, for now I am going to just set the default value to, let's say, /4 component.html file, and here we are going to create a button. So I will use button, and we will name that as go to fourth. Okay, and we're going to call a click event on it. So we call, let's say, click equal to, I'll just use go to route, and let's take a look at our application. Right now we're not seeing any button because of this. So we go to app component SAS file, and here we have the split height to, let's say, 100%. I'm going to change that to 70%, and I'm going to give top as, let's say, 20%. Does it take 20%? I'm not sure. Let's see. All right, so we are seeing this go to first, second, third. So let's go to app component, and we are going to cut this and put it on the top. Or maybe we can just comment this code for now. There you go. We got the button there. Right now we are in the second route, and I'm going to click on that. Once I click on that, you can see it is going to the fourth work. So it is going to the fourth component. You can also access what is your active route. Now I'm going to use this dot then. That's a promise. And I'm going to use console.log, and I'm going to say this dot route dot, and we are going to try getting this URL. Let's save the file. Now if I refresh the page, that goes to fourth works. So let's take a look at what's happening with our URL. So that's going to fourth. I'll just remove that, and now I'm going to take a look at the console after I click to go to fourth. Now when I look at the console, it is actually not printing anything. Well, it did because we had a filter on. So here we have this fourth. So right now you see what is the route that you can access from this router.url. So far, we've been routing between components within one module. Now let's take a look at how do we navigate between different modules using lazy loading. So lazy loading is one of the best thing in Angular, which means if you're trying to access one module or one part of your functionality of your application, it is only going to load the code which is required for that particular functionality, and that makes your application fast. It loads fast, it works fast, and less memory usage. So your application is more efficient. Default ng modules are eagerly loaded, which means that as soon as the app loads, so do all ng modules, whether or not they are immediately necessary. For large application with lots of routes, consider lazy loading that loads ng module as needed. Create some feature modules. I'm going to use terminal to create a feature module for me. I'm going to open a new terminal, and we are going to start with ngg, which is short for generate. We're going to generate a module, and we can just name that customer. Now I could just generate a module by just using this ngg module customer, but we also have some flags that we can use. I'm going to say route, and I'm going to name it customer as a route. Then we can also tell Angular CLI how to use that feature module into the main module, which is app module. So we can say module app.module. Enter. And now you will see we have, let me zoom out a bit like that. Now what it did is it created these files. It also updated this app routing module for me automatically. If we look at this customer module, it has its own customer module.typescript file, and it is importing this common module and customer routing module. We have this separate file, which is basically an array for routes, and we also have this imports. So right now we are using this router module for child. The difference between this router module, here we have this router module for root. So you see this router module for root. So this is basically telling you that this is a parent level or root level router module. But here, because it's a feature module, we are using the function for child, and we're passing the routes array. Right now we only have one part, which is empty part, and that's going to be this customer component. And we also have this customer component injected in our declaration for this customer module, which is a feature module. Now, the way we go to this module is by adding a routing between modules. Now, if we take a look at this app routing module, something has changed. So let's hide this bit, and I'm going to move this then to the next line. Now here you will see we have this another path which is set to customer, but instead of specifying the component directly, it is using this function called load children's, and then it has this function calling which we are importing this customer module by specifying the path in the import function. And then when it loads it, then we are calling this m, which is the instance of that we're calling m.customer module. This way, if we specify this slash customer, it is going to go into customer module, which is going to load all its route. So I'll save the file. Let's go to application, and if I go to customer, you will notice one thing. I'll enter. Now you'll see it says customer works. Now again, our route is loaded in router outlet. So this is where we specify, right? Also specify multiple router outlets. So if you want to specify a router outlet here, so you can do that router outlet. You can specify its name. For example, let's just say customer. Now, by targeting this customer, you can specify where you want to render your HTML for this module. I'm going to show you some documentation where you can read more about it. It's pretty much the same thing, but you got the point how to use router outlet. It's a placeholder. So here we have a documentation for router outlet. I would like you to read about this description and how to use this router outlet by specifying the name, and there is good information here. Now, after we learn how to route to a module, we're basically going to wrap up this routing section of this video. I would like to show you some of the documentation for you to understand more about routing. So first of all, you gotta go to this developer guides and then go to this routing and navigation. We covered the basics of routing. This gives you enough knowledge to actually go ahead and create an application in modules using lazy loading. But here we haven't talked about is nested routing. So you can have the first component that you will target, but you can also have this nested routing with this router outlet. So I would like you to read about this nested routing using relative paths. The information is pretty good. If you read this, you will get an idea how to use this. Now, also, there is a use case where you want to prevent unauthorized access to your routes. For that, there's a concept of guards in Angular where you can basically go ahead and read this and you will understand how to implement guards. Actually, we are going to look at one little guard. So what I'll do is I will go ahead and first of all remove this. Let's create a guard. Okay, let me give you a quick demo of a guard. So if we go to app routing module, here is a path for the customer, right? Now I'm going to move this function down and I'm going to add a key here. I'll say can activate. Okay, now this will have a class which will marked as a guard. So I will go ahead and then say ngg guard and I'll say block it. This will create a guard for me, and now you can see it is asking me which function I would like to implement. So I'll just use can activate and you will see we have the guard here. So this guard class is still an injectable. It is like a same decorator for services as well. You have provided in the road and it implements this can activate. Now, if this returns false, okay, let's say false. And the way we use this now is by specifying its name. So let's copy this. We go to app routing module and I'm going to say block it guard. Okay. Let's save this file. We go to an application and what we're trying to access is dash customer. Enter and you will see it is not going to show you anything here. because it is blocked by this guard. So if I returns true, enter, save the file. Let's go here, refresh the page, and we're going to try accessing customer. Enter, and you can see here it says customer works. Now you're able to access this. Now, this function here will be basically take all the logic. For example, if you want to check if the user is logged in with the right credentials or right token, then you can write a logic here and then return true or false depending on the logic. For example, you might have stored the token in your local storage and you check that if token is available, then you return true. If it's not available, then you return false. So guards are really important in application which require authentication or authentication specific route. So we've seen the demo as well. Here is the command for that. So you can generate guard automatically and it will configure pretty much everything for you. So we have like functions for the guards like can activate or can activate child or can deactivate. So I would like you to click on them and then read about what it does. Okay, we looked at the demo, but you can read more about this can activate child. For example, interface that class implements to be guard decided if a child route can be activated. So we have the child routes that we've seen already that can be activated or not. So we can specify that by using this can activate child. Can load, can resolve. So there's a difference between can activate or can load. So interface that class implements to be guarding decided if the children can be loaded or not. So here is the sample for that, how you use it like that. So you got this can load and then you pass in the can load, your guard that you create. I'd like to point out this base ref. I want you to read about this. This is very useful information. Now if we go back to our code, we go to this index.html file. Here you will see we have this base href is equal to /. Now what this does, it is basically implemented by default when you create a new Angular application. But what it does, it is written here and it's very straightforward. Just read about it. Some of other options that we've already seen like router imports, so router module and routes. We have some configuration that we've already talked about, a router outlet that we've seen. So I want you to click on this router outlet and read about this. Okay, you can have a multiple router outlets. Router links that we use, this router link, read about this router link active, which will allow you to add multiple classes depending on if the route is active or not. Here we have this activated route. So here there's a class called activated route. So we'll click on that. You can import this and you have all of these functions available. For example, the URL, the params, query params, a data, outlet, component. So all of this information can be retrieved by use activated route for the current activated route. Let's go back. We have this router events. Time you use a router link to route to the next component or next module. These are the events that you can listen for. For example, we have this navigation start. Let me show you a quick demo. How do you listen for this? We go back to the code. I will go to this app component and here we have this router. I am going to listen for events in a constructor function. So I'm going to say this dot router dot events dot subscribe. And I'm going to just do a console log event. Okay, let's save the file. We go to the application and here you'll see a lot of logs here already. So it says navigation starts. It is URL is customer. Then we have this navigation config load start, navigation config load end, then route recognized. Then you see all of these events are triggering when you go to this page. So I'm gonna delete everything from the console. We'll go to click to go to fourth click and you'll see all of these events happens and you can listen for them. I would like to show you how you can enable tracing by default. So all the router events that will happen in your application will automatically be logged, and that is for debugging purposes only. We go to app routing module. Here we have this for route function, and I am going to add a comma after route. So comma, specify an object, and here we can specify enable tracing to true. Let's save the file, and now every time you go to any route, let's clear the log, go to route, you got this -4. If you go to a different route, let's say customer, enter, you will see all of the tracing happening in the console. It can be really messy. If you basically take a look at all of these events, it will just log every single routing event into your console. So sometimes it's okay to have that enabled because you want to debug your application, but sometimes it's hard to see which you're looking for. So make sure you enable and disable depending on the requirement. So this is where we end our journey with routing in Angular. Let's take a look at some more documentation before we wrap up routing. So this page is very important. You have to go through this after watching this video, so you remember what you have learned in this video. So we've pretty much covered everything, and I've also shown you some of the documentation that you should read about. Now, it's good to actually take a look at this router module. So if I type router and I would like to go to router, take a look at these functions that are available to you, like events, routed state, error handles, and navigated. So here is the constructor function that you can basically pass these parameters to the router as well. And that's very advanced topic, but you want to read about it if you want to become master in Angular. Now, also, there are some methods available. For example, initial navigation, setup location change listener, get current navigation, and all of these methods will have this description right below that method, so you can read about it. For example, we use this navigate by URL, okay? Well, we also have this navigate, which will have some more options available to you, and that's really cool. So in the real world application, usually this is the function that gets you, because with this you can pass in data as well. So I would like you to read about this router and the router module, and that's where we wrap up our navigation and routing in Angular. Main topic that we haven't talked about are forms in Angular. If you know plain JavaScript forms and HTML forms, how to manipulate them, this should be very, very easy for you. I'm gonna talk about some of the documentation and give you a guide how to learn more about forms, because you are a developer already. That's why you're watching this video, and you should be able to read the documentation and learn about forms. Some of the things that I will show you, which are like a basic style, which will give you a kickstart using forms in Angular. So let's go to the documentation. Here you want to go to forms in developer guide and go to forms. You get to this section where we have introduction, reactive form, validate form input, dynamic form building. Now, there are two types of forms in Angular: reactive form and template driven form. I'm going to go to setup in template driven form. This is the URL for that. Let's click on that. And the example is pretty simple. We've already seen that. So what we're using here, this ng model and the property, and this will basically update the property value, and then you can use your plain TypeScript code to deal with that value which is coming from this ng model and this property. So template driven form are very, very simple. It's like very close to plain JavaScript forms. But one thing which is unique to Angular is reactive forms. It's not unique to Angular, but it's like, an Angular approach of dealing with forms. Now, if you are creating an application, I would highly recommend to use reactive form. Avoid this template driven form, which is like very close to plain JavaScript or TypeScript way of dealing with them. So there are a few things. We are going to click on this setup in reactive form. So it says here, let me read this for you. With reactive forms, you define the form model, directly in the component class like TypeScript file, and then use this form control directive link to explicitly create form control instance to a specific form element in the view using an internal value accessor. And here's a simple code for that. Now, before you can do that, you need to make sure you import form module. I'm going to copy this bit here. Let's copy this input field. Let's go back to the code, and we are going to create a form in our app module. Let's go to app component. Let's get rid of this bit here. Okay. And we are going to just paste that bit here. But here it is giving me an error. It says form control since it isn't a known property. The way we fix it is by importing a reactive form module in our app module. So for template-driven forms, you need to use form modules, but for reactive forms, you need to use this reactive form module. So I'll start by typing reactive form modules, and this is going to get imported from this Angular/forms package. Let's save the file. We go to app component, and it's now no longer giving me that it is not a noun property. Now here it says flavor color control. We're going to just use test prop. Now this property is actually already defined in app component. So if I go to make a space here, and the way you create a new form control is by using this variable and say new form control and passing this single quotes there. I'm going to save this file, and I'll save this file, and now our code is compiled successfully. Now I am going to look at some documentation here. So we are going to create this form control, and this form control will have some options for us to use now. So let's say we are going to specify the name of the form control. So we'll just say test prop. Okay. And within here, we are going to use this interpolation, and I'll say test prop.value. Save the code, and now if I start typing, you'll see it is going to read the value from that form control and start putting that because we have this interpolation in the HTML file. Also have some methods on this form control. To read more about that, we'll go to this API reference for form control. So here's an API reference for that. What you can do is you can set the value by using this set value method. You can patch the value, you can reset it, register on change or register on disabled change. We can access this value validator, async. So all of these can be used with the form control. You see there's a lot of them. So if I'm going to go and explain each of them, that will take like 5 hours. Okay, so let's use some of them. All right, I'm going to go to this app component, and here I'm going to say, let's say, modify form control. Okay, now this is the function. I am going to right click, and in VS Code, I'm not sure, I'll click on change all occurrence. I'll just say modify form control. Okay, let's give a space there. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to make sure if the VS Code updates this, so it does not. So let's save this file and save this file. Okay. Now I'm going to remove this code, and I'm going to remove this parameter as well. All right. Now I'm going to basically, first of all, show you one method that you can call on it. So I'll use this dot test prop dot set value. And we can pass it value here, hello world. I'll save this code, and now if I click on this button, you will see hello world will be set onto that form control. Now you know how you can call methods on this property. If we go to documentation, here we have, let's say we will have something called clear. Let me search for it. So Let's say clear. Okay, so that's just clear validators, clear async validator. Well, that's not what I'm looking for. So what I can do to clear it, I can just use this probably empty strings. Oops, save it. Okay, so if I go and type the value, I'll click on this and that will clear it because we're just saying, hey, set the value and value is empty. See, it's a trick. Now we can also see if it's touched. A touched is something that once you click on the form, okay, the state of this has become touched, that you've clicked it. All right, so go ahead and then play around with these methods on form control. Usually, when you are dealing with forms, you don't have to deal with only one form. You usually have a group of forms, like a form for putting user details or a form for writing an email, like two emails, BCC or CC field, and then the email body field. So you have a lot of forms, right? Now, Angular provides a way to group form controls. So we have the class called group form control, where you can import and then create multiple forms within a group. So I'm going to just copy this bit here. First of all, in our app component, I will import this form group. So let's go above. I'm going to type a comma here. I'll just say form group. Once we import that, then I can go ahead and then just create that form group. So here we have this profile form and we're creating two fields in it using the form control. Now, this is basically a group of two forms now. You can have as many as form controls within the group. Now, you might be wondering, what is the benefit for that? And there is a benefit for that. Let me tell you, you need to read this, okay? It's basically, it makes it easy for you to deal with multiple forms in one go. So read about this. You will get to know how you can use the form group module. I wouldn't say module. It's basically a class. So read about this, grouping the form, creating nested form groups like this one. This is very important. So basically you create a group, then you create multiple form controls, then within the form control, you create a new form group, and then, so this form is a good example for that. So you got a first name, last name, address, and address should have its own fields like street, city, state, zip. So this will help you to group those. Let's go down. We want to talk about this form builder. A form builder is really helpful for creating form control instances manually, can become repetitive tasks, right? So you have to create those form controls again and again. This form builder will help you to do that very, very quickly. There should be an example for that. Now you can see here, we are creating this form group. So first of all, we got this.fb, which is basically a form group or form builder. Actually, it's good to take a look at the demo, okay? So I'm gonna do this form builder, right? Then we got this form builder. We're gonna inject that into our constructor. I will say private fb colon form builder. Okay, now I'm going to use this form builder to create a form. I'll just say profile 2 equal to new this.fb. Okay, let me take a look at documentation. So here we got this fb dot group, and then we have this object within a function. Now this is giving us an error. What's going on there? So it says new expression whose target is this. So we don't really need to use new because it's not what we're doing. Okay, so now you can just start specifying first name and then this array where we'll have an empty string. Very, very easy. Form builder is going to make your life easier because you don't have to say new form control, new form group. You just start specifying this form and then you will have that ready to go instead of using this. So you see this, you have this form group, form control, form control, form group, control, control, control. Instead of this, you can simply use a form builder to do that. Now again, there will be a function available for form builder, which what you can do is you need to go to the API reference. So once you click on that, here we got this controls, arrays, and that's about it. So you read about it here and you know what to do. Now, we need to talk about this validating form input as well. The explanation in this guide is very well explanatory. So if we look at this validator functions, we have some validator functions built in. And here's a class for that, validators. So we have these validator functions like min, max, required true, email, min length or max length, a patron for regex. This is another very important null validator. So let's say email, right? So how do we use that? I'm going to remove this form group, actually form builder. We don't need that for now. Now here we got this form control. Okay, I'm gonna add a comma and I'm gonna start by typing validators dot, and here we got all the built-in validators that we can choose. So if you go to, let's say, min, okay, now it's giving an error. It says min is 2 or min 3, so we need to say min 2. Save the file, and now when you type the valid first name, it will basically check if the minimum 2 is fulfilled or not. If it's not, it will throw an error for you, which will basically be handled in HTML file. So again, you're gonna have to look at this documentation, how to use them, and how to show an error. Let me show you this here. So here we got this a form control, which is set to as name property. Now within this, we are creating another div, and it says ng if name.invalid, name.dirty or name.touch, then show this color alert danger. That's a CSS class that we are going to just apply to that bit. Or you can, add some message for the users as well. So take a look at this. Very, very easy, straightforward. And this is where we wrap up our forms stuff for this Angular crash course. We are going to take a look at how do we use the external UI library such as Angular Material in our Angular application. Libraries like Angular Material can help you a lot in terms of building a nice UI. They have pre-built components that can be used in your application, and that will make your life a lot easier. They have a concept called semantics, which means there's a pre-built UI ready for you to use just by implementing some commands in terminal. We're going to take a look at that, and you're going to fall in love into Angular Material, I promise. So I'm going to go to Safari and type for Angular Material. Let's search for it. I'll click on this, and here's a library. Very, very good library, and trust me, you're going to fall in love with this. So let's get started by importing that. There's a command ng add Angular Material in your application. But first, let's get rid of some of the things. So I would like to get rid of, actually, let's create a new application. We're going to open terminal, and I'm going to go this, and we'll say new, let's say my app, enter, and yes, SAS, and that's it. Now I'm going to close this window. And once our packages get installed, then we are going to open this into Real Studio Code by using the code space dot command. Project is ready. Let's check it out. The code, my app, enter, and that will open VS Code with the folder in it. Now I'm going to go to the terminal and simply going to paste that command, which is ng add at Angular/material. Let's verify that. Actually, I don't trust my typing, so I'm going to copy that command. Let's paste it here. enter, and it is going to do a lot for you. So it says using package manager, found compatible package version, which is this one, 11.2.8, and it says installing packages. Now, if you take a look at the package.json file, you will have some of the package getting installed. So Angular/material, that is getting installed as well. Now, there are some pre-built templates, themes that you can choose from. So let's go to documentation. And in the documentation, you should be able to take a look at the themes. So we have some purple themes by default. Let's use that. And I'm going to say set up global Angular material typography. Yes. Set up browser animation for Angular material. Yes. And it's going to update package.json. And we should have Angular/material/animation package, I believe. So let's wait for this to finish installing. So it says now app module is updated, Angular.json is updated, index.html updated, and style.sass file is updated as well. So let's take a look at style.sass. That's what it added, the typography. So here we have a lot of components, pre-built components. Okay, now the way you use them now, for example, if you want to create an Angular button like this button, you need to click on this button here, which will enable view code option. And what we want is this section. I will copy this bit, go back to my HTML file here, and right above the route outlet, I'll just paste that section. I'll save the file, our server is running, and now I'll refresh and you'll see we have these buttons. Now, these are not exactly the buttons that we were expecting. So if I just hide code, you'll see the design here is different than what we have in our application. That's because we haven't imported this button module in our application yet. So if you click on API, you will have to do this, import this bit in the module where you are going to use this component. So we are in app component, so we need to import that in an app module. So import that bit and we'll go and add that to our import as well. So all of these components in Angular material are built within their module. So there's a button module which has all of these buttons available for you to use. Now, if I go and save this file, now I'm going to take a look at it. Now this time you'll see we have those buttons available. Now we have the right styling and how easy it is to create these nice buttons. Now in Angular material, you will also have some attributes like matte raise button, matte flat button, matte stroke button. So for example, if I go to app component, I will just zoom in a bit. I'm going to change this to, let's say, matte flat. Actually, not this, matte flat button. Save it. Let's take a look. This is a flat button now. We also have this matte fab. What is this matte fab? Well, let's find out. So we just use matte fab, save it, and you'll see this round looking button there. That's usually in the mobile applications. We also have this mini fab, which might be smaller. We can take a look at this matte stroke button. So let's take a look at this by changing this bit. And if I refresh, you will see here we have this stroke button which is set to accent. So the goal for this section of this video is that to show you how you use this component. So I'll show you one more component, then we will go to CDK stuff. So here's a simple card. I will go ahead and then copy this bit and then paste it here, right above the URL. Once you save this, this is going to throw an error. It says, hey, this is not a known element. The reason for that, we haven't imported its module. So if you go to API, you have to use this matte card module, copy that, and we go to app module. Now, it will be required in the module which you're going to use for that particular component. So if I say matte card module, save it. Now, if you look at your application, you'll have the card appearing. So there you go. That's the card. Let's turn of this developer tool. So there you go. This is the card. Let's find some more examples for the cards. So let's say we'll go here. I'm just going to look at the code and I'm just going to copy this and then go to app component and then just paste that here. Now there will be an issue because, okay, there is a link for the image basically coming from Angular website. So that should be good. So if I save the file, we'll take a look at this and we do have the card now. So there we go. Okay. So basically you import the module for the component and then take a look at the documentation, then you should be able to use this. So there are a lot of options for like card headers, title groups, or you have this focus tab index. So yeah, all of these components are very, very easy to use now. If you know Bootstrap or any other framework that you have used in the past, this should be surely very easy for you to. Now, one thing that I want to show you before we wrap up this video is this guides. I want you to take a look at this semantics. We have this some semantics that we can use out of the box from Angular material. So I would like to use some semantics. For example, I'm going to use this command. Let me zoom in a bit. So here's a command for ng-add angular.cdk. Let's copy this. We will stop the server, clear it, and paste it here. Once we have that package installed, then we can take a look at some of the component semantics available out of the box. Like we have this address form, navigation, dashboard, table entry. So what I want to show you is dashboard. Let's go down, and here we have this ng generate, and we are going to use this command. Okay, this is going to be a component. Now I'm going to paste this and I'm going to name the component, let's just say dashboard. Enter, and you will be surprised what it does for you. So here is the dashboard component. If I take a look at the app module, we have this automatically basically updated. We go to this app routing module, and here we are going to use a path for dashboard, and we're going to use a component which is going to be this dashboard component. Okay, let's save this. Now if I go to dashboard, you will be surprised what happens. I'm going to the developer tools / dashboard. You want to take a look. Let's press enter, and right now it's not showing anything. Why? All right, let's save this file. Save this file, and we make sure that we basically have this right online. Guess what? We're not running our application. So let's do ng serve -- no - open. Let's wait for the server to start up. It's compiling. See this, it's got a lot to compile now. All right, compiled successful. So if I go now to this / dashboard, press enter, you will see we do have that stuff on the top, but we also have the dashboard here. So what we can do here now is I'm just gonna remove everything. Save. Now let's take a look at the content. There you go. So here's the dashboard that was created for you. Very, very easy, right? So take a look at this. Take a look at this, what it does for you. This is like a reusable dashboard that comes out of the box. We take a look at something called navigation semantics. I will copy this, and I'm going to stop the server, paste it, and I'm going to say navigation. Enter, and this is going to add this semantic. So we have a second component, and if we take a look at this app module, we have that navigation component right here. So what I'm going to do now is we do have a route outlet, but instead of adding a route, I'm going to go and modify this bit and just get rid of this. Okay, I'm going to make my main page as dashboard looking page. App component, first of all, we're going to use this app navigation right on the top. Save this file and we go to our page, and there you go. You have this navigation module. I'm going to use developer tools and I'm going to make this width a bit smaller. Once I take it a bit smaller, you will see it will be converted into hamburger and you have this kind of animation. That is really cool. Now I want you to go back to documentation and take a look at this navigation component, which will allow you to modify it with some properties that is basically available for you to out of the box. Now we want to create some sort of like a dashboard, right? Like admin dashboard, which is very, very easy with Angular material. I'm going to hide this developer tools, and we are going to go into app navigation component. So let's go to app navigation. Here's some of the code that you can modify. For example, open true or false, and you can also have like a a navigation tab like a dialog navigation or override a side. So take a look at the documentation for this bit, this mat side nav, which is going to give you a lot of options. All right, so here it says clearly add your content here. So the content that I'm going to add is going to be app dashboard. And I'm going to save this file and let's take a look at our application. There we go. So we have this navigation bar on the side and we have these cards. Okay, so as you can see, this is amazing, right? You just had to, use the two commands which will create you these two components, and you just have your admin dashboard ready to go. And these cards are flexible. We're not going to take a look at the all the options available, but go ahead and then take a look at some of the components that are used in that. For example, this would be side navigation. So if you look at this side navigation, here's a jar content and the main content. And we have some options that we can specify, like position and the right. So maybe let's try this. Position and to map dash side nav. So here we have mat.side nav. We don't have a position attribute. So I'm going to give it a space here. And let's say position. Let me just paste it here. Save. Now the navigation is moved to the right side. You see how cool is that? So take a look at the documentation for all the components that are used here, especially with this mat toolbar. They have a really, they're really flexible. You can expand them very, very easily by following the API guide. All right, I would like to say thank you so much for watching this video. This was basically a crash course for Angular. There's a lot more knowledge that I could share with you, but within this 3 to 4 hours, that's not possible. During the course or during the video, I've been showing you a way to find more about Angular by using its official documentation. And I would encourage you to take a look at the documentation as much as you can, so at least you know what's available to you. This video have given you enough knowledge that you can start building Angular applications. We have covered all the core concepts. Now you should be able to start building Angular application, and if you need more information, you should always refer to official documentation, which you already seen how I use documentation to find more stuff about Angular. We also looked at Angular materials. Very, very easy. Few commands that you injected, and then you have an Angular material ready for you to use. So this is basically a crash course, but there is a second part which will be a project-based video where I'll show you some application that will be built using Angular. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and then also let me know in the comments below if you like this video or if you have any suggestion for me teaching a different way, maybe. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Talk to you guys in the next video. Cheers.